Testing. Everybody, please take their seats. We're going to begin the proceeding. Okay. Mr. Clerk, this is August 10th, 2021, Tuesday. This is a special council meeting on behalf of the, you guys ready? Okay, then, Mr. Clerk, this is August 10th, 2021, Tuesday. This is a special council meeting of the Providence City Council. We're going to call this meeting to order. Mr. Clerk, can I please have the roll call?
Council President Igliozzi.
Present.
Councilwoman Anthony.
Present.
Majority Whip Castillo.
Present.
Councilman Correa is absent. Council President Pro Tempore Espinal.
Present.
Councilman Gonsalves.
Present.
Deputy Majority Leader Harris.
Present.
Councilor Kerwin is absent. Councilwoman LaFortune is absent. Councilor Miller.
Present.
Senior Deputy Majority Leader Narducci.
Here.
Councilwoman Ryan.
Present.
Councilor Salvatore.
Present.
Majority Leader Taylor.
Here.
Councilman Vargas.
Here.
You have 12 present and 3 absent. You have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. The invocation will be led by Senior Deputy Majority Leader Nicholas J. Narducci, Jr.
In the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, amen. Tonight's invocations are going to be a little different. As we look over to the left, where our city sergeant used to sit, you see a black robe and flowers. Our city sergeant passed away last night at roughly 11:30 due to a long bout of cancer. I met David when I was 11 years old and he was 12. We had a swim meet at the Wanchka Boys and Girls Club. David was one of the best people that I've ever met. We've seen each other get married. We've seen each other have kids, grandkids. I was able to help David become our city sergeant. I was very proud to do that because I knew how dedicated and loyal he would be to all of us, all 15 of us, including the administration. At any given time, any one of us in this chambers could call David, and David would be there. There was times David was going out on Saturdays handing out the mailings and the notices for upcoming meetings. David really loved his family. He loved his wife. He loved and worked very hard for his kids. And he had a very special feeling for his grandkids. You couldn't ask for a better friend if you had David as a friend. Like I said, it's a long time. And I just wish each and every one of us could keep David's wife and kids and the Tassoni family in our thoughts and prayers. And maybe really look, David was just turned 62 in April. And maybe really look and say, how do we set our priorities? This man went too early. I look over at the chair. Excuse me. And I said, and I say, David, I love you. May you rest in peace. Amen.
We could all stand for a moment of silence. God bless David Tassoni. Mr. Clerk, next is the Pledge of Allegiance, led by Councilwoman Joanne Ryan.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For the first item, I want to talk about the rules of engagement for this meeting this evening. We will present we have four individuals, witnesses. We have, of course, we have the commissioner, we have the chief, we have the FOP president, and we have our Institute of Nonviolence. They will be sworn in. They'll have 5 minutes to make their presentation and discuss the topics this evening. After they're all done speaking, then each council person will have an opportunity to speak for 3 minutes for the first round. So at that time, I will acknowledge each council person. You have 3 minutes, and then you can say what, if you want to ask questions, you want to say a speech, whatever it is, but that's your 3 minutes. I would ask council members to respect each other's time. I will keep the time, and then when I raise my hand or get a little gavel, know it's about a minute to go. And then the next council person will have an opportunity to ask questions for 3 minutes or make a statement. And then when we're done with that, we'll do one more round if need be, and then we'll conclude. But I want everybody to know that's the process. Okay. With that, Mr. Clerk, could we read item number 1, please?
Item number 1, discussion relative to public safety crisis/concerns, including but not limited to public safety action plan to address increase in violent crime, enforcement of ordinance prohibiting ATVs, public safety budget and staffing, perception of lack of safety and the impact on city and neighborhoods, and presentation by public safety in response to prepared questions. The following have been invited: Commissioner Stephen Perry, Department of Public Safety; Colonel Hugh T. Clements, Jr., Chief of Police, Providence Police Department; Michael Imandi, President, Providence Fraternal Order of Police, Lodge Number 3; Cedric Huntley, Executive Director, Nonviolence Institute.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next item, we're going to enter exhibits into the record.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader,
we have the following, like to enter the following into the record. The first one we have is a list of questions. Would like to enter that in as Exhibit A.
do you have a second? to
Second,
that?
Mr. President.
A second to identify for the record a list of questions that have been provided to the Providence Police Department, Chief Clements, as Exhibit A. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
Mr.
Next.
President,
Yes,
also, I'd like to introduce the ATV laws. It's 3 ordinances to put in as Exhibit B.
Second, Mr. President.
I have a second by Deputy Majority Leader Harris. Discussion as Exhibit B, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries.
And Mr. President, finally, the Boston Globe article today to put in as, enter into the record as Exhibit C.
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Councilwoman Deputy Majority Leader Harris. Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, motion carries. Next item, Mr. Clerk, I believe we have the 4 witnesses. Could we swear them in first, and then we'll begin the proceedings?
Would you gentlemen please raise your right hand? Do you swear under penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Why don't you start with the commissioner first?
Would you
Commissioner?
please, Commissioner, please state your name and title for the record?
Stephen Parry, P-A-R-E, Commissioner of Public Safety for the City of Providence.
Colonel?
Hugh T. Clements, Jr., Chief of Police.
Mr. Amandi?
Michael A. Mondi, President, Providence Fraternal Order Police Union, Lodge Number 3.
Mr. Huntley?
Cedric P. Huntley, Nonviolence Institute Executive Director.
And I would ask you all, as you're testifying, could you please, the mics are directional, so as long as it's pointed at your mouth, the audio will be picked up just great. So if you could just swing it over your way whenever it's your turn to speak. Thank you so much.
And also, you press the button to the right, and when the mic looks red, that means it's on. Okay? See that? Thank you. Next, I think, do you want to enter these into the record? Do we have these additional exhibits that are going to be submitted by Chief Clements?
We do, Council President.
Okay, so do you have, Mr. Leader, do you have the items identified for the record? You have the items? So I will enter into record as exhibit what, D?
Exhibit D will be the Providence Police Personnel,
The chart?
2001 chart, yep, to 2001 to 2021.
No, that's, which one? Do I have a second?
Second.
By Deputy Majority Leader Harris. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Next item?
Next item we want to do is Exhibit A,
No, be E.
I mean E, I'm sorry, Exhibit E, which is the 2010 Police Department Table of Organization.
Second, Mr. President.
Motion by Majority Leader, second by Deputy Majority Leader Harris. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Next item?
Like the Exhibit F is the listed as Patrol Bureau days, it says days, it's a color graph. Exhibit F, this one.
Okay. This one here.
Second.
Right. Second, discussion, all in favor? Aye. Next item?
Like to enter Exhibit G, Providence Police Sworn Personnel Rank and Shift 2021.
Second, Mr. President.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
Like to Exhibit H, enter into the record Exhibit H, Providence Police Department Districts and Posts.
This item right here.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next item?
Um,
I think you can do the next ones as a package. There
as a
were,
package.
yeah, the
All right, so the 68th, 69th, and 70th.
67, 68, and to the 70th Providence Police Academy.
Okay,
This
so
is a full
68,
exhibit.
69, 70 will be Exhibit I, enter into the record.
Second.
Second by Majority Leader Harris. Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
And then,
Say, why don't you make these together?
then we got the,
This is one exhibit, these 2 pages.
that's the Chief's Office. We'll put that in as J, Exhibit J.
Second.
Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
That's it, right? Is that it?
Okay. You got these 2, right? These 2 items?
Providence Police Department Sworn Officers 2001-21.
Yes,
You want that in as, where are we?
that's already in.
K,
Okay.
Exhibit K.
Second.
Majority makes the motion. Deputy Majority Leader seconds it. Discussion, all in favor? Aye.
That should be it.
That's it, Eric. That's all the exhibits, correct?
Yes.
All right. So I guess let's start from the top. Start with Commissioner Perry. You have 5 minutes, sir. And set the clock, and I will begin that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you to the council. We are in the past 6 weeks or so, a cycle of crime and violence here in the city. No question about that. Horrific shootings and homicides that happened most recently up on the east side of a innocent 24-year-old lady that died at 3:30 in the morning as a result of a drive-by shooting. And any homicide is horrific, regardless of who it is and where it takes place. But without a doubt, in the past 3 to 5 weeks, we've had an uptick and a cycle of crime and violence. I can tell you that being in law enforcement for nearly 4 decades and a second department in which I serve with the best police officers here in Providence that put their heart and soul into their job. And we're in a tough time, not only locally, but nationally as well, as we've seen in the past 2 years. But the men and women of the Providence Police Department continue to come to work each and every day and give their best in trying to prevent and curb crime and violence. You will talk a little bit about, the specifics of why it's happening. And if we had the tools at our disposal, we'd certainly both ask for and get them so we can prevent the shootings, prevent the crimes. It's complicated like anything else, whether it's what we're faced with for the last couple years with ATVs running rampant through the city. We're not tone deaf to that. And we've strategized and talked across the country because this isn't happening just in Providence. It's happening throughout the country. And it's not an easy solution. And I appreciate what the council has done in giving us some tools in the last couple of years to forfeit and seize and destroy these ATVs. It's as frustrating to me, and I'll let the colonel speak for himself, as it is to you and our community when you see mobs of illegal ATVs and dirt bikes on our city streets with no regard for the safety of others. This department's a great department. And we continue to do the very best. Staffing is down. That's not the only driver of crime and our efforts to deal with all these issues that have most recently been in the forefront. But I can say that with the partnership of the Institute and many others, we do our very best, and the officers and detectives that do that work partner with the community and with the Institute and many others to prevent the cycle of gang violence and gun violence. There's a lot of guns on the street. That just didn't happen in a month or two. It's been the last 2 years. And you can guess, and why has it been driven so much? Most recently with the number of guns in the street. We're seeing it, we're feeling it, and this department has seized weapons more this year, year to date, than in the past. We wish we had a solution to stop this gun violence. We're doing everything that we possibly can, and we are laser focused to stop gun violence. And whether it's using other resources, partner with other resources, whether it's a state police and it's an item agenda here, or any other police department that can help us, prevent gun violence rather than having to respond and investigate gun violence. Most recently, we've had victims in this spat of the last 3 weeks that, although it appears to be a random act of violence, whether it's a stabbing in the neck or a shooting of 5 individuals up on Reservoir Avenue, we're not able to come to a final, resolution in bringing those that are responsible, because victims don't want to cooperate, don't provide any information to the police, and it leaves us hamstrung in holding those accountable that should be held accountable for those crimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Perry. Next, Chief Clements, your opening statement, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you to the council. My thoughts and prayers to the city sergeant and his family, and Nick. I know how close you were to him and his family, so my thoughts are with you. And as well, my thoughts are with the victims of all crime, gun crime, homicide in this city. Over the course of this year and always, we've been here a long time, and unfortunately, gun crime has been an issue. And I've always said, in this police department, we should not shy away that we have a gun problem or that we have a gang problem. And we haven't done that in the Providence Police Department. So I know there's a list of questions of which I'm not going to get to all of them during this opening. I provided many documents for your review, and I'm open to questions at the end on each of those documents. But I did want to hit a few of the high or generalized issues in my first 5 minutes here. So crime, what we're seeing is eerily consistent with what's going on around the country. That, well, in particular here, all crime is down, believe it or not. We've had a horrific 4, 5, 6 week run, but the data is the data. We've provided that, and crime is down, believe it or not. What isn't down are shootings in the last couple of weeks and homicide. What we've seen is more lethality around the country, and that's happened here in Providence as well, where we will see a crime scene where maybe 3 years ago, 10 years ago, we'd have a small amount of ballistics, and today we're seeing crime scenes with 25, 28, 61 shell casings on a scene. It's incredible the amount of firepower that's out there. And it's incredible the midst of what the men and women of the Providence Police Department are exposed to, in all honesty. I do have these storyboards here. I don't know if somebody was going to throw those up front, and I could stand up and just refer to that very quickly, or do
Ziggy,
you
could
want to
you do
pull them
that,
up on the
or-
screen?
Okay.
That's good, and you can leave that one right on the side, right here. So look, the Providence Police have done so much over the last 10 years, and I'll hit the high notes. A huge accomplishment for this major city police department, and one of the few, a very small percentage of major cities in this country who became CALEA accredited. We did that in 2014. We became reaccredited in 2017 and again in 2021. As well, state accredited, state certified. We were selected by the Washington, D.C. Department of Justice to create a national training protocol for police community relations. We were voted twice the best community police department in New England. Most importantly, and here's what we're here to speak about tonight, is resources and the workforce and manpower. In our time, this command staff, along with Commander Verdi and the majors, we've had 3 academies that we're very proud of: the 68th, 67th, 68th, and 69th. We presently have the 70th Providence Police Academy in session. During those academies, we have hired 164 officers. 101 of those officers are from minority background. That's a huge accomplishment. I don't think is matched, certainly regionally, I'll say. This 70th Providence Police Academy has 49 recruits and 30 are minorities. They are due to graduate on November 6th. The Providence Police Department, I was selected to testify before a congressional subcommittee in Washington, D.C. We were the only police department invited to speak at this session about violence in urban communities in America. And it was received extremely well. There were senators in the room and staff, and there were law students from University of Georgetown and American University. And after the session was over, when they heard the story about the Providence Police, they all marveled about the great work that we had done. And it really is incredible work. And so on and so forth, created the Community Relations Bureau, the only department in the United States 2 years ago to receive the Community Policing Award in the same year in 2 separate categories. We are the only police department in the United States to have ever done that. We've done some magnificent training with our partners, 2021 department-wide de-escalation training. We had a speaker come in. He just finished up last week. You cannot get this training around the country. He took time off his schedule to come to Providence because he knows what we're up against. This guy trains nationally, internationally. He's scheduled through 2022. We went through the entire academy and the entire Providence Police Department as well. We do all sorts of training with our partners, including the LGBTQ plus inclusivity training, of which we had a $100,000 grant. We've done several trainings with Cedric and his group. Let me just show you this one other chart, though. Here's what we're up against. In our time as a command staff, the last 3 department leaderships that go back to 2001. So when I interviewed for the job to be the chief of police, I said the bare bones minimum we would need to run this department would be 448. And I had the number down because we were 9 districts. We were I knew how many we had in detectives and narcotics and traffic, and I had the number 448. Not once in our command staff time have we had 448. In fact, in my time, in our time in this command staff, the highest number that we had was 443, and that was in 2014. And look at the crime numbers for 2014. Increased officers does not equate to lower crime, but I'll tell you what it does equate to. But in 2014, I had 443. So that was the highest we've had during our tenure. Previous chiefs, their lowest that they had during their tenures was higher than my highest in the 10 years that we've been here in the command staff. Look, I know it's not all about the workforce and bodies and the numbers, but that's hurt us significantly. It really has. It truly has. And, you know, we say all the time, you want to hear do more with less, but in fact, you lose the ability to provide some of the community policing that is essential that we've provided over the years. The way we feel that it should work, and we've had unbelievable proven success in much of the data that I've given you, Mr. President, and the council. And to do that, right now we have 5 districts. When Dean Esserman came and re-engineered the Providence Police Department, he did a full analysis of what this police department should be. And that analysis was going towards certainly 500, getting to 550 to 600 in his notes. We sat for months. We broke the police department down into what it should be, and it was 9 districts with 9 district commanders. Each district commander had every car post covered. Each district commander had footmen. We had the ability to have bike patrols. We had the ability to have directed patrols. And what would happen, and Mr. President, Councilman Igliozzi could tell you, we would go to community meetings and we would have a scribe, and they would identify issues in their neighborhood, and the scribe would take notes. And the issues would be similar and from neighborhood to neighborhood and district to district. But what we would do is take notes on the 5 or 7 issues, and during the course of the next month, we would attack those issues with directed patrols. And we'd go to the next community meeting, and I'm telling you, from neighborhood to neighborhood, district to district, we would get standing ovations because it was a problem-oriented policing approach, and that's what we should do. We should be directing our resources to what the problems are at the moment of the community. And quite simply, we haven't had the resources to do that. We've done well. There are charts in there will show how crime has gone significantly down, and we're experiencing a really bad moment in this police department. If you look from 2011 till 2021, one other thing I want to say about the workforce of the Providence Police, we've built a culture of excellence and leadership. Under our command staff, 7 members of the command staff, 5 have become chiefs, 2 have become directors of security. When people around this state are looking for leadership around security and policing, they're looking to the Providence Police Department. And that's a good thing. And that wasn't always the case here, but that's what they're looking at. We continue to drive crime down right up until the middle of 2020. In the middle of 2020, pandemic occurred, George Floyd occurred, voices were heard, and there was a lot of mixed messaging going on throughout this city and throughout the country. And we became demonized and villainized, or some things, quite frankly, we didn't do in Providence. I will say we have our issues in the Providence Police Department, and those issues are dealt with. People are held accountable in our time in the command staff. And I'm not proud to say this, but we've done it. 26 members of the Providence Police have been terminated or forced to retire because we felt on those issues they no longer deserve to be. And some of those very, very, very good people. It's just for what the incident that occurred, it was time for them to remove themselves from the situation. So I think it's very unfortunate how we've become demonized. And I will say this, I support the men and women of this department 1000% because I know what they do. I've done it. I've led them, the commander, this command staff. And that's why it's so unfortunate because we know it's not about us. It's not about the commissioner. It's not about me. It's about the community. It's about our connections. And people that know me know that I love this city. I love this police department. I love this community. I haven't had that much fun as I did the other day at the Dominican Festival, and that was an honor for me, a complete honor. And it's not about us. It's about the community. It's about Black, Latino, Asian, white. It's about the neighborhoods, each one of the neighborhoods, Oneyville, South Side, West End, East Side, Summit. We can do better. And I think we really need to do better. And first and foremost, I think we have before us the 70th Recruit Academy, graduates November 6th, which is important. I think we need 3 academies in a row. We need, look, I may not be here 3-5 years from now. We've said it all along. For this police department to work, as I just described, with a full district and foot posts and directed resources towards the issues in the community, that's where we need to be, to best serve this community. It's unfortunate, but you can see it's all in the data. Like someone told me, the stock market over the years goes up and crime in the city of Providence, this is real data. We're a data-driven organization. Over the last several years, crime continues to go down. All that I asked for, and I haven't had it. We haven't had it. If you look at this, we really haven't, and we've been able to do it. But I asked for the latitude to do this, the resources, and the support. We do tough work in this community, including with crime and ATVs. ATVs is a real tough issue, not only here in Providence. This is going on all over the country. Look it up. Look at what Philly, San Jose, Boston, Atlanta, many of them have no chase policies. We do not have a no chase policy. We have a pursuit policy where we're required to pursue these vehicles in a safe and prudent manner. But you need to understand, this is a really tough issue that no city has really successfully grappled. And when we pursue an ATV, an all-terrain vehicle, it's called all-terrain for a reason. They can go left to center, they can go down an alley, they can go up on a sidewalk. They're causing risk in their community. And if we do that, we're causing more risk for the city and more risk for the police. I know I'm over my 5 minutes, but I just wanted to talk about crime, the issue of ATVs, guns in our community. Lastly, I'll say we've seized this year with an arrest 143 firearms. Last year, the same time, 43. 43. Think about that. So we're seeing incredible amounts of firepower and gun violence. And the men and women have done that this year, 143. These are not easy arrests. Every single one of those is a really difficult arrest. And we had one the other day at the festival, at the tail end of it, where a young man had a firearm and people in the community pointed it out to the police. And when the police approached, he turned, he pointed the gun right at the head of a Providence police officer. And there are two Providence police officers right there. They both drew down on that individual. And one of the officers, when he was diverted away from looking at the officer he was pointing the gun at, ran over and knocked him down. Both officers were fully, they each could have shot at him. And we've had that situation no less than a half dozen times this year. This year alone, the Providence police have not fired one bullet. Last year, the Providence police have not fired one bullet. In this city this year, with the violence that we're seeing, there have been 639 shell casings picked up in the city. Not one is from the Providence police. I know we have our issues that are called into question. Leave it up to this command staff to hold people accountable, and we will, and we have. Thank you, Mr. President.
Chief.
There are so many charts up there, but I just wanted to identify those 3.
Thank you, Chief. Next, Michael Iamundi, President of the Providence Fraternal Order of Police.
Good evening. I'm not, I don't have anything prepared as far as that's concerned, but.
I'd ask you to keep the mic as close to as possible. You can move it if you want. Okay.
I don't have a prepared statement. What I do is I talk from my heart and I talk what my officers are feeling and what we feel about what's going on in the community. So the violence in the community is first and foremost to us, okay? We don't like it. We want to do something about it. We want to work with the community in trying to resolve this. But we can't do that if our hands are tied, okay? As the Colonel alluded to, with the lack of resources, this also plays into it. So the more officers you have on the job, the more you're able to fill all the extra units that are involved in getting the job done. Gun task force, gang units, community policing, being able to go to the events and have a police presence. More officers on the street create a deterrent to criminal activity. All these things play into it. One of the biggest things that's playing into it right now, besides the lack of resources, is the lack of support the men and women of Providence Police Department feel, okay? We don't feel we're supported by the administration at some levels. So that plays into the confidence level of a police officer going out there and being able to proactively police. And if you can proactively police, you're going to police better. If your morale is high, you're going to police better. You're going to do a better job for the community. You're going to engage with the community. You're going to do more for the community because you feel like you're appreciated. You feel like, you have the support and the backing that's necessary, just like with any job or any position. If you're a politician, you feel your community is backing you and supporting you. It makes you feel like, I can do more for this. I can do more. I can do better. It's the same principles with the police officers. Every day they put on their uniforms and they come to work. And obviously by the crime stats, it's a very dangerous environment that they work in. Every incident that they go to could be the last one they ever go to and the last time their family ever sees them. So we need to, as a part of rebuilding the police department to manpower levels that are going to help, serve the needs of the community and the public, we also need to serve the needs of the police officers as well. And by that, I mean, just support them. They need the support. They need, they just need to feel like they're backed because they don't feel that at all right now. And I've been in multiple conversations with Chief Clements, and I know he supports the police officers in Providence. It doesn't come out as often as it should from the administration that they support us. I've heard what the commissioner just said a little while ago about how we're the best police officers he's ever worked with and how, he commends the officers of Providence Police and we're this, and all of that. But the minute something goes wrong or something hits the papers or doesn't look or perceived in a manner, they back off of that and automatically, rather than vetting out all the facts in the case and all the evidence before that's even done, come out and basically throw the guy under the bus or the girl under the bus, and that's not the kind of support that officers need. The kind of support officers need is that, until the facts are out, you're better off not saying anything than to vilify us. You're better off just saying something along the lines of, yep, it looks bad. We're going to vet out the process. If the officers did something wrong, then they're going to be held accountable. Rather than throwing something out there and saying it looks horrible, it's appalling or whatnot. That plays into the psyche of a police officer. That plays into how they're going to feel confident going out on the street doing their job, especially if they've done it correctly. And they find out through the vetting process that it was done correctly, but you've already put it out there for the public to see that this officer is demonized and demoralized. That has an effect on the whole police department, okay? It has an effect on the whole police department because now they all come into work, and as they've said to some, myself included, as they've said to me, how do I do my job? What do I do if I run into this situation now? I did everything the way I was supposed to do it, and I'm being criticized. People are being critical of what I'm doing. Listen, everything we do is not going to be perfect, and we're not perfect. We're human beings, just like everybody that's sitting around this room right now. We're all human beings. We tend to make mistakes, and if we make a mistake and it's verified, that person's going to be held accountable. Okay, and I bring up these issues because it all plays a fact into how we police and how we can make policing better in the city. Okay? If we have the confidence that we know our city council members, our partners in the community, and, our command staff we have their support, and we have the knowledge that they're gonna be there for us, through the tough times and through the good times, it's going to translate into a better working relationship with the communities. And by having a better working relationship with the communities, you're going to be able to reduce crime, because you're going to have that relationship where we have the confidence to walk up to one another and talk to each other rather than, walking away from each other. And that's what I'm trying to get at here tonight. Because everybody on this council knows I don't get along with everybody here. I'll be the first one to say it. Okay? You don't get along with me. I don't get along with some of the people here, but I would never close my door to something that a city council member has to say. I would never not answer their phone call. I would always listen to what you have to say. And if it's constructive and we can work with it, I would work with you all day long, all night long. I would be there. And the membership that I represent would do the same thing. So all I'm asking for is give us the support we need. Give us the resources that the colonel's asking for, and let the colonel run the job. Okay? All the other communities in Rhode Island have a mayor, and the mayors have come out recently and in public that their chiefs have autonomy to run their departments. No outside political interference. If he's given the ability to do that, I believe, and I believe my membership believes, we could turn this around and we could make this happen, where we can make Providence a city where people will want to come back in and not be afraid to. Want to bring up their families, live with their families here, raise their children, make the community safer again. Stats don't tell all the stories. The public's perception is part of the story. And what they see on the news and what they believe in their heads is what's going to drive Providence to be a beautiful city again, with vibrant things going on in the city, and having people come in and just have that feeling like they used to have of Providence being a great city, and not one that they want to avoid coming into or are afraid to bring their families into. And this is what we want as a police officer in Providence, as a former Providence resident. And I still have my family that still lives here. But this is what we want. We want a safe community for everybody to come into, and where they can reach out to the officers and feel comfortable talking to us, and we can reach out to them as well and feel comfortable. But right now, we feel our hands are tied. We feel we're being ridiculed and criticized, demonized and demoralized. And I'm sorry, but coming to work every day with that feeling, every day, and they still put on their uniforms and they still come to work, they still do their jobs, and they do it to the best of their abilities. And as the colonel alluded to earlier, you know what? We haven't fired a shot. And there are many opportunities where probably the officers may have been justified to do so, but we don't. We're not that group of individuals. Okay, we have our incidents here and there that may look that bad and whatnot, and some may actually be that bad, and some have been, and we're not taking away from that. Okay, those officers are going to be held accountable, whichever ones go outside their scope of duties. We're not here to protect that, or protect them. We're here to protect the officers that do it right and get demonized for doing it right and criticized.
Thank you. Next, Cedric Huntley, Executive Director of Nonviolence Institute.
All right. Yes, my name is Cedric Huntley, and I asked myself, why am I sitting here with law enforcement, fraternal order of police? I've been asking myself that question for the last few days. I understand why. I understand that it's been a relationship for around 18 years. We have been involved with the Providence Police. And I before I go into that, to the council, my condolences on your colleague and friend, to all of you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Even if I question why I'm here, I I got a sense why I'm here. And I think we have to go back to the history, you know, where the police department was 18, 20 years ago. I think we have to remind ourselves on the progress that we've made. And I don't think we should go back. I think we move forward. And so I've said this to anybody that will listen. We know on a national level, law enforcement is demonized. But here in Rhode Island, here in Providence, this is not the time we turn away from law enforcement. This is the time that we support law enforcement. This is the time that we support our community. Chiefs talked about the class, you know, the 68th, 69th, and 70th class. I think that helps, right? I think having more classes help. What was really important is that collectively, there is a collaboration. All of us are responsible for it. I stand here, I sit here, one of the principles, one of the steps, the first step in nonviolence is to gather all the information. Gather the information before we judge, before we condemn, right? And I use that step in everything that I do. And I encourage the Nonviolence Institute staff to also make sure that they practice that step because it's that important. I stand with all those who want a safer community. We all want the community to be safe, right? That's stuff we have in common. Everyone, I've talked to many of the council people, sat down last week with Councilwoman Harris and Councilman Espinel, and we talked about the safety of the community. We got to keep that in front of us. And in that safety involves every last one of us that sits here, that sits behind us, that's on the Zoom meeting. We all are responsible. We all should support each other through, and many people don't talk about this, through the common decency of respect, the common decency of love of the beloved community, because that's really what it's all about. And so for us as the Nonviolence Institute, we promote that. And we will work with anyone that supports that. So when things happen because of our relationship and our partnership with law enforcement, oftentimes I'm on the phone. I may call the commissioner. I may call the chief, have questions. But my comment and charge to them is you have to get it right. When it's right and you're transparent about what's happening, we can move forward, right? So get it right. If something, and none of us are perfect. None of us are perfect. But we got to get it right when it's wrong. We have to get it right. And we can do it. So I look at, my lens is a positive lens. My lens is around the beloved community. And who is in the beloved community? All of us that sit here, that make the decisions, all of us that are sitting behind us, and all of us that are out there as part of the community. I would venture to say that 95, 97, 98, you could put a number on it, of our community is great. Providence is a great, great city. It's a beautiful city, diverse city. There's a lot of things happening in this city that are very positive, and we should focus on those things. And part of it is working with everyone that's in this city. So I'm getting the gavel, I guess, if you would. So my question is the question that I ask myself: why am I here? I'm here to support a community that involves everybody. I'm here to support a beloved community, and that includes law enforcement. And I refuse to go and demonize something that I believe is really a very integral part of the city moving forward. And I am unapologetic around it because I know how important it is, because I remember where it was. And we can't go back there, and we must move forward, keep positive, and keep the beloved community in our hearts.
Thank you. Next, we have, before we begin the next, we have Councilman Correa, who has a statement I'm going to enter into the record.
Mr.
And then
President, I'd like to enter that into the record as exhibit. Where leave off? Exhibit L.
Second, Mr. President.
Second by Deputy Majority Leader Harris. Discussion, all in favor? Aye. Mr. Clerk, read the item into the record, and then we'll begin the question and answer period.
Dear Council President and Council colleagues, I am sorry I am not able to join my colleagues this evening to address these very important issues. I had a long-planned community meeting to discuss, among other issues, public safety, and I feel it is more important than ever that we spend time with our constituents to keep them confident in our leadership and assure them that we are working to keep them safe. That said, first and foremost, I have said it from day one, I fully support the men and women of the Providence Police Department, and that support is unwavering. Our city is at a crossroads. The violence that occurs in each and every ward, in each and every neighborhood, each and every day must stop. We must provide the police with the tools they need to do the jobs that they were trained to do. We must provide the funding and support to continue developing programs, relationships with outside partners and community stakeholders, and outreach to our most vulnerable. That includes our elderly residents, our residents who are facing crisis situations, those suffering from mental health issues, and our youth. We as leaders must remove any constraints that have been placed on our officers so that they can do their job and allow them to follow the law and not be directed to stand down. We must provide them with a full complement of officers. We must have open communication with the leadership and command staff of the Providence Police Department. We must provide funding in the form of grants and funding from our federal delegation to continue the practice of community policing, which will allow the police department to promote the community policing model that our officers are trained on. We must ask the colonel and the command staff, what do you need from us? We are fortunate to have the best police chief in America. You've heard that statement from the administration many times. However, unlike the mayor, we mean it. And Colonel, we will support you in your decision-making, not direct you. I will close by saying once again, the men and women of the Providence Police Department have my full support. Thank you for your time. Michael J. Correa, Providence City Council, Councilman Ward 6.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Next, we have Councilman Nicholas Narducci.
If you don't mind, I'm going to stay sitting. First of all, I support everything that's been said. Whatever resources we need, we shouldn't be sitting here talking about. We should be making sure the police department receives those resources. Just like the homeless crisis, we keep talking and talking, and it gets worse and worse. I don't want to see that happen in what I call my city. Okay, because some of us should take ourselves out of their wards and remember that we're city council people, the whole city of Providence. I know for a fact the morale's down. A lot of the men and women of the police department, I know personally, I've known for years, I talk with. Commissioner Parry, you have to support the men and women of the police department. You can't in front of the press, you and the mayor cannot in front of the press belittle the situations that happen and put the men and women in a bad spot right off the top without an investigation even being done. You can't come out with the press and say how we need to do more, we need to do this, we need to do that. And then when it comes to time, as it was said earlier, the support's not there for them. The support is not there from the higher ups, yourself and the mayor moving forward. Hopefully we can get that to change, because it's a well-known fact that we ran a police department for many, many years without a commissioner. It was the chief and the mayor. The mayor, I guess one of his roles was commissioner mayor. And it went well. It went well. The bottom line is like I've been saying for the last 7 or 8 years, I've been here 14 years now. We have people that used to look forward to going to Federal Hill on a Friday or a Saturday night and have dinner. Many of them from my community, many of them older people in my community, will not go to Federal Hill anymore. We got people that are afraid to stop at stop signs and red lights because of what occurred last week. I live here my whole life. I've told the story before, and I'll tell it quick again. My great-grandmother came from Italy, Ellis Island, to Marietta Street on Charles Street over 115 years, and the Narducci's is still there. I'm not going anywhere. I want to fight the fight. I want to support whatever we need to support. But the bottom line is we can't have a commissioner and a mayor not there for us. Not there for us. Mike Monday, Cedric, I agree 100% with everything you guys said. And most of what you guys said, I was going to say, but I won't echo it because I know we're kind of on borrowed time. But again, I had said, even in this budget, when they didn't want to put another academy, I said, I will not support a budget that doesn't support another academy right after this academy's out. I will not do that. I will not support defunding the police. I will support refunding the police. I will support making sure that the men and women of our department have what they need. I mean, you heard about the weapons on the street. We're all very educated people to a point of what's happening in our city. We don't have to watch the news. We don't have to listen to it on TV. We know what's going on. We also know that at this point in time, the criminals, the guns that are out there are not legal guns. They're illegal guns being used by criminals that are probably better weapons, better automatic weapons than the men and women of our police department have. You heard, not one shot fired with all the BS going on in our city right now from our police department. We all seen a situation on Sales Street escalate. And we had one police officer, Commissioner, that made a comment, does anybody want more? Well, you know what, Commissioner? After that comment was made, that crowd calmed down. That officer did his job. That officer did not deserve 10-day suspension. No way. Yeah, really. He did not deserve 10-day suspension. Maybe a day, but not 10 days. You need to come out, you need to support. The mayor needs to support. I, Council President, I will support moving forward. I will end with this. Moving forward, Council President, council members, my colleagues, we need to support what they need to do their jobs moving forward in the future. But we need to do it now. Not tomorrow, not next month. We need to do it now. We heard what they need. Let's support what they need. Council President, thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry, ma'am. We're in the middle of a meeting. Ma'am, I respectfully request that you please take your seat. I respectfully request you just take your seat. Let us continue the proceedings at this time, please. Madam, I ask you to please take your seat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next council person. Oh, Councilman Salvatore, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Council President. First, let me thank the body for convening tonight. I know folks want to spend time with their families. We're in the middle of summer. But when I asked that we convene this meeting, it was based on a lot of the concerns and fear that I'm hearing from my constituents, not only in the neighborhoods that I represent, but across the city. So again, I thank you for being here tonight. Now, public safety, we've talked a lot about over the last 2 years. And I think we can all agree that we need a comprehensive approach to addressing the violence and the crime that's happening in Providence. And it is true that we are seeing a nationwide trend going, quite frankly, in the wrong direction. However, we live in Providence. This is our city. And I'm not as concerned about the national headlines that we've been receiving, but I am very concerned about the regional headlines that we've been receiving. And they're not good. The way we do this, the way we address public safety, and I think it's been said and I'll repeat it, it has to be a collective effort. It has to be an effort of us as elected leaders. That's where it starts. It starts with us as elected leaders working with the mayor. And I wish the mayor was here tonight because we have to do this together as a team, as lifelong residents like Councilman Narducci, like others. We have to do this in collaboration with each other because if we're not all on the same page, folks, we're not going to make the progress that we need to make our constituents feel safe. You know, last week or 2 weeks ago, we passed an ordinance. And we talked about a lot about ATVs. And it was about safe streets. We all want safe streets in different ways. The ordinance that we all supported addressed it from an infrastructure perspective. But I can tell you a lot of the illegal activity that's happening on our streets relative to ATVs don't make my constituents or your constituents feel safe. So I think it's about time we did have a tough conversation about public safety, what this means comprehensively, and how we can tackle it together as elected leaders, as the community, as public safety experts. I'm going to address something briefly that has been talked a lot about in the press over the last several weeks, and that is the call for the state police to provide assistance. My dear colleagues, let me be crystal clear. Crystal clear. There is nothing, and I have great respect for our state police, but there is nothing that our state police can do that our men and women in the Providence Police Department cannot do already. We are a model department, as Colonel Clements indicated earlier, for the rest of the country. I've said this before publicly, and I'll say it again. We're not a perfect department. We're not. We could use additional training around various disciplines, but we are a model agency for the rest of the country to replicate. I do appreciate the fact that resources have been offered. And I think it's incumbent on us to have those conversations because we do need a cooling off period in Providence. The violence that we're witnessing should not be tolerated by anybody. We know folks who are victims of violence. Their families don't want it. They're not going to tolerate it, and we shouldn't either. And again, that's going to take the collective effort of a lot of folks in this room and in this building to mitigate it. Mr. President, I have a few questions relative to the comments that were made by the presenters. We heard that staffing is down. Can somebody elaborate on what that means when we say staffing is down and what is needed to run an effective department? Colonel, you indicated that you're looking for, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think it was 3 to 5 academies?
So yes, thank you, Councilman. Staffing is down to 404 when you factor in, which is always the case, officers out on military, IOD, long-term sick, we're minus 36. So we're closer to 370. We are yearning, desperately need November 6th to come very quickly because that's when the 70th Providence Police Recruit Academy graduates and will hit the street. They'll have 10 weeks of FTO training and immediately, like even next week, we should start advertising, recruiting, very shortly thereafter, testing for the selection of the 71st Providence Police Academy. Because, you know, let me tell you, Councilman, Council President, this city, the psyche and the morale of the Providence Police Department has been damaged with comments that have been made and the psyche and morale and police officers around this country. But I know we're different. We've all heard the same comments from everyone behind a microphone tonight. We're different here. And I think we're in danger of having a greater amount of officers leave the job, and our attrition level will be much higher than we've seen in the past. We're seeing that around the country. What I don't want to see is that happen here.
Follow-up question, Mr. President.
Yes, Councilman.
Colonel, how many IODs, current IODs, and members of your department who are eligible for retirement?
It's about 110 eligible to retire. I believe it's around 9 IODs. We have several out military. We have a few out suspended, as we spoke about, holding people accountable. And, you know, all those numbers combined is 36.
Can you provide the council with a number that you need to effectively carry out the community policing model that I know you embrace and that many members of the Providence City Council embrace?
Bare bones minimum, we should never go. The lowest number, 450. And the whole time that this command staff has been put in place, we've never had that number, and we've gotten it done. Bare bones minimum, 450. As an assessment was done many years ago, a department of this size to provide the service that we said we were going to do for this community should be closer to 500. Actually, the letter said, the document said 550 to 600. You know, we could be a great department. We'd have foot posts everywhere. And that's not in the form of warrior mentality policing. That's in the form of community engagement and problem solving in the community for quality of life issues that are important to residents in the city and the neighborhoods. That's what's important.
Moving on to firearms, recently within the last year in the neighborhood that Councilman Narducci and I represent, over 100 firearms were reported stolen. Can you state that any of those stolen firearms are attributable to the violence that we have seen? And by the way, let me go on the record to say, this isn't recent violence. We had this problem in the fall too, specifically in our neighborhood. So can you say that any of the firearms that were stolen that are on the streets illegally, are any of those attributable to the violence that we're seeing recently?
Yes, so we had two large caches of firearms that one was a false report, that 53, I believe it was, firearms were stolen. That was a false report. And some of those firearms from that point in time have been recovered by the Providence Police and the nexus has been connected with violence in this city, including recent violence. As well, there was a separate cache of firearms, about a dozen stolen, and some of those firearms have been connected with different groups in the city attributable to violence.
Thank you. Moving on to ATVs, and I'll keep this brief, Council President. Colonel Perry, you indicated that you need tools during your presentation. I don't think there's anything legislatively that the council can do. We passed 2 ordinances that were introduced over the last 6 years. We've been told by the department, if enforced properly, we would be able to take more ATVs off of the road. I know that we have confiscated as a city over 200, but that's been over the last 4.5 years. So my question to you is, what tools do you need to be effective at mitigating the ATV issue in Providence? And let me just also state that I've spoke with folks in the rider community. I know they're looking for a space, maybe in Providence, maybe outside of Providence, and that's a conversation that we should have. But again, reiterating what I mentioned earlier, we all supported a concept around safe streets from an infrastructure perspective. I can tell you that the elderly residents that I represent, the disabled residents who I represent, they're frustrated and they don't feel safe. So please tell the body what we need in terms of more resources and tools to curb the illegal ATV use on our local roads.
So I don't believe that legislatively there's any additional tools, if you will, or programs that exist anywhere in the country that are not here. This council passed some pretty aggressive ordinances that allowed us to forfeit and seize and destroy. It's complicated. I wish I could say, give me X and I'll end ATV and dirt bike activity on the streets, but there isn't one solution. Of course, people help, and I believe leveraging some resources that have been offered from the state police would help as well, but even that, they cannot come in here and stop the ATV riders. I'm not saying I'm throwing my hands up and there's nothing to do, but it's complicated. And yeah, the men and women have taken by far the most ATVs off the streets of Providence than anywhere in this state. And they've done it in a safe way, except for one incident, unfortunately. And no officer wants to go through what we went through and that particular officer a year ago. And so we need to look at different strategies that are being used across the country. And there are some in which we could leverage and start knocking this ridership that is illegally causing havoc and safety on our streets. I'm not going to come back next week and next month and say it's been resolved and there's no more ATVs driving on the streets. It's a continuous both challenge and effort to stop them from driving on the streets and causing so much public safety hazard for our residents. We haven't given up and we won't give up, but understand it's both dangerous for our officers and for the public when we try to intercept. But there are some strategies that will deploy, have deployed, and will continue to deploy to take the bikes and get them off our streets and arrest those people that are driving recklessly.
Mr. President, follow-up comment and question. I think it's fair to
Last
say,
one.
Commissioner, that this is not a Providence-specific issue.
That's correct.
We learned that the young woman who attacked the innocent mother and her daughter, although her daughter wasn't hurt, her daughter was attacked too. She should have never had to have witnessed that. But it is fair to say that this is not a Providence-specific issue, and we talked a lot about, or we've been talking a lot about bringing in or leveraging state police resources. What is our relationship with other local law enforcement departments? Are we working with neighboring cities and towns? And I'll be honest with you, I'm not looking for a political rhetoric or, pointing the finger. That's not going to accomplish anything. And I'm not saying that anybody in your department or in the city has, but I think it's about time we started working collaboratively with our neighbors on this issue, because I don't think it's a Providence-specific issue.
I agree, and I know the Colonel has some comments, so I'll defer to him as well. Look, we got a great relationship with our neighboring towns and cities. The Colonel probably more than I, but I was actively involved in the Police Chiefs Association, and that's where you build relationships. So whether it's Winquist or Gonzalez or, whomever in these neighboring towns, okay, at the leader level, there's good relations, but more importantly, at the officer level, at the detective level, there's even a greater relationship that they can share information and they can put their resources together and prevent, combat, and hold people accountable with their criminal behavior. Can it be better? I don't know that it can be better, because we this is a small city relatively, and they're in Johnston and they're in Cranston and Pawtucket and Center Falls, and we work collaboratively, in my opinion, with all of those departments.
Well, I hope that collaboration continues. Somebody was severely hurt last year, and I fear that it's going to happen again, if not worse, and it's going to be one of our neighbors. So again, I think there are conversations to be had with the rider community. I know what they're looking for, but the bottom line is we cannot allow these vehicles to travel in a very dense population on our local roads. It's dangerous. And I know that my constituents and the families that I represent are frustrated, and they.
Sorry.
I would just
I
add,
pressed the wrong button. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
Councilman,
Thank you.
I would just add, we have a great relationship with our partners, neighboring local law enforcement. I've conferred with Colonel Manny from the Rhode Island State Police several times. I will say this for the record, nobody can address crime in their community or in an urban community like Providence in a compassionate way, in a community-oriented policing type of way. As it relates to the ATVs, that's a huge issue. And as I identified earlier, Philadelphia, Atlanta, San Jose, Washington, D.C., look it up. I mean, they're having massive issues. We do have strategies in place with the Rhode Island State Police. We'll be moving forward with them. I think they can be helpful with us on that front. But what I ask for, and look, I 1,000% support the good work of the men and women of the Providence Police Department, but we need support both before and after operations. I would tell you, this job has become nearly impossible to do without criticism on the back end. And there's nothing in a book or training or in perfect fashion that you can take some of these ATVs and their riders who are reckless, lawless. We've seen it. We've heard about it off the street. The community is up in arms. We're up in arms over it. There is not a magic solution. We do have some strategies we're ready to employ going forward with our partners. It needs to be addressed, but more importantly than anything, the support, both up front and after. They're just reckless. And we've tried to have, there are so many young men and women that we've now seen, and we've tried to have positive conversations with them about operating in that manner on these streets. And we've seen several tragedies on the roadways with these young men and women. And it will continue unless we get a better handle on it.
Thank you, Colonel. And I'll just conclude by saying to the three gentlemen who are representing us on the public safety side, continue working with Cedric and his team. I know you will. Fighting violence with violence is not the solution. We all agree with that. And Cedric is, somebody who has made himself accessible to every neighborhood in Providence. And I think the resources that he provides is a wonderful opportunity, I think, to curb some of the violence that we've been seeing.
Thank you, Councilman. Next, we have Councilwoman Ryan and Councilman Majority Leader Taylor and Councilman Gunn Cobbs. Councilwoman Ryan.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. I would just like to start by offering
Councilwoman, could you put your mic a little bit closer to you?
Can't hear me? Can you hear me now?
I think it's better, right, Mr. Clerk?
I would like to
Thank you.
start by offering my condolences to my dear colleague, Councilman Narducci. I know the close relationship that you had with our beloved City Sergeant Tassoni. So please accept my condolences as well. I would also like to start my remarks by recognizing the folks in our city that have been hurt, victimized, vilified, compromised in any way by this increase in violent crime that we have. The reality is, I hear time and time again at each community meeting, when I'm at the grocery store, where I'm at a street corner, people do not feel safe in our neighborhoods any longer. Something has happened. I have lived here all my life. I have the utmost respect for the Providence Police Department. As a council person from the get-go, I have dedicated myself to working with them to make sure they have all the resources they need to be effective in their jobs. And I want to thank my colleagues for supporting those efforts. Years ago, we led the country in community policing. We were heralded as a progressive, effective community police department. We've had, our numbers have dropped, our ranks have dropped, our challenges have grown. We've done more with less, or asked to do that. And I want to take this opportunity to commend Colonel Chief Clements. He is a remarkable man who's done a wonderful job leading our police department. I shudder to think where we would be if he was not in the leadership role that he is today. He is absolutely remarkable, and his presentation today was very interesting, and it gave me great confidence. However, I came here tonight to get a public safety plan, to understand what we're going to do going forward. People don't feel safe. We need to fix it. To me, the ATV situation was horrifying. The other day when I heard that report of a young woman pulled out of her car and her young child in the back and beaten on our city streets, it was absolutely unacceptable to me. And I have heard time and time again, I know the command staff appreciates that I have worked diligently on ATV legislation. I passed the legislation that gave due process rights and gave the police the authority to take the bikes off the street. That was what was asked. Again, this council, this body, continues to try to provide the resources that are requested from the police department. However, it's troubling for me. And again, once again, that ordinance has been copied in municipalities across the country. We were leaders. We're not a leader anymore. I recognize that ATVs are a challenge. I'm a little disappointed that we haven't accepted the assistance from the state police sooner. I understand they're now working with us, and that's wonderful. But I want to be able to tell my neighbors, my residents, that there is a plan in place. There is a defined plan that is going to bring relief to this crime that has just skyrocketed. For the first time, I said I've lived in this neighborhood, my neighborhood that I represent, I grew up there. I'm hearing people are leaving. They're leaving the city because they don't have faith in the administration. When my colleague brought up ATVs, Colonel Parry, you responded. I'd like to hear from the chief of police. How can we employ the state troopers? How can we prevent? I come out of a council meeting, I drive on Smith Street, the very location that young lady was pulled out of her car in. I had the same experience where bikers circled my cars. I talked to countless people, they have the same experience. That is unacceptable. It's unfathomable that that would happen in our city. And that is something we need to address. So what are your thoughts? What can be done? And I know Commissioner Parry said that you're working on it and it's problematic. What can you do? What do you need from us to address the situation? Thank you.
So again, I've met with Colonel Manny on several recent occasions. We will accept the resources of the Rhode Island State Police as it pertains to our attempts to push down the ATV activity. Again, there is no magic solution on the ATVs. We talked about some pretty interesting things of which we can't reveal those strategies, but I will say this, because of our resources, not only ours, but theirs as well, we may not be able to deploy that more than, I'm hoping we can do it twice per week, but maybe not more than once per week. We just don't have the ability to set out those directed resources on ATVs every single day. It's a challenge, but I think once those riders know that we're more serious and we push back like we have done in the past, it curbs that activity a little bit. So it's a real tough challenge, I'm telling you.
Thank you. Just to follow up, if I may, Mr. President, I'm troubled that, we reported that 200 bikes were taken off the street. I'm well aware of that. The 200 bikes were removed from the street starting from 2017 to October of 2020. Subsequent to that, the mayor basically went to the General Assembly and asked to legalize ATVs on our streets. Many of my council colleagues were very concerned and expressed concern about that action. Obviously, that was pulled back and he subsequently has retracted. Is he still interested in Commissioner Parry, can I ask you directly? Is it the mayor's intention to legalize ATVs? Is that something that is still a plan for him?
I'll say that I think it continues to be a consideration for the legalization of some of these ATVs. And this is a plan that some other cities have deployed. And he and the administration looked at that model. So my response is, I think it continues to be a consideration. Whether it's, moving forward, certainly it had not moved forward formally in this latest session of the General Assembly, but it is a consideration.
So the thought is to legalize, would you register these bikes or would they be unregistered ATVs on our street?
No, the plan that I saw in other cities were to give legislatively the ability to register these vehicles. And so the thought is, if they're legal bikes, they're safe bikes, they have all the equipment that is required of vehicles to be traveled on our roadways, then it'll be safer. Registering them obviously would enhance our ability to identify who they are and also the requirement of insurance. That's the model that was used in other cities, and that's the model that was under consideration this session, and I believe under consideration for next session.
Colonel Clements, what do you think of legalizing ATVs?
I have a problem with that, to be honest with you, in that, look, I think we should look at locations where they can utilize these vehicles off-road, not on city roads. I think in dense populations, it creates a huge public safety issue. And there's where the mixed messaging is. I mean, if, you know, from the standpoint of the rank and file, from the standpoint of the command staff, for us to go out there and direct the workforce to take some of these bikes off the street, it's hard. And that's why I'm asking for support before operations and after, because it's all about risk. And I've spoken to City Solicitor Jeff Dana, who does a great job working hand in hand with the police department, and we appreciate that, Jeff. It's everything that we do is risk management. And there are so many things that can go wrong if we become aggressive on rooting out ATVs and scooters, because they're all-terrain vehicles. They're small vehicles. They can go up on sidewalks. They're operating reckless, lawless, and we can't do that in city vehicles. And nobody wants to be the next officer or two who's acting in an aggressive manner, and then they're not given the support. And I fully understand that. And
What is, if I can interrupt you, sir, what is your message to our residents when their cars are circled by these ATVs? What is one to do? What advice would you give them?
it's happened to all of us in police cars. It's happened to me. I heard a story from a neighboring chief of police. It happened to him in Boston. 60 bikes and scooters surrounded him in Boston. And there are many municipalities that have, and I identified it, the no chase policy. We do not have a no chase policy, but we do have a pursuit policy, which allows them to pursue them safely. So look, we're going to be taking some steps coming up to become more aggressive in going after these bikes. And we have to do so with some strategy. And myself and Colonel Manny and Commander Verdi have talked about some of those strategies and initiatives. But we have to be cautious and do it with risk in mind. It's a huge issue. If we pursue a vehicle and go through a red light and that ATV or scooter strikes and kills a pedestrian, or worse, we do, that's an issue. And those are the things that can happen when you have pursuits of these vehicles. That's why all those municipalities have a no chase policy.
On the no chase policy, if I can just follow up, perhaps when I speak with rank and file, they're told.
Councilwoman, please speak in the mic.
Sorry, sir. When I speak with rank and file, I hear time and time again that they're told that they are not to chase ATVs. And I use that same language, Colonel, that we have a chase policy or pursuit policy, excuse me. I use that language with them and I am told that's not the case. We're told not to chase ATVs.
That is true. We're told not to chase ATVs. We teach in our policy states that the safest way to take these down is when we can corner one or two of them, or to get them when they're not operational. And that's how we've gotten many. And that's how Philadelphia has been successful, when there's, maybe you can grab them at a red light in a gas station, parked on the side after you've seen them committing violations on the roadway, or you know it's not registered. So that's how we've captured many. To be in high-speed pursuits with mock vehicles is not safe, and there's a lot of risk.
Thank you very much. Just one last question and I'm done. When we discipline an officer, how does that play out? Who makes the determination that discipline is warranted? Is that the commissioner?
So we speak about discipline all the time, and by charter, yes, in the end, it's the commissioner by the charter.
Okay. With your consent, or is it solely?
Hey, look, the commissioner and I, we've been together for a long time in the leadership of the Providence Police. We agree on a lot. We don't always agree on every single aspect of what we talk about, including some levels of discipline. But for the most part, we've agreed, but there are times, and we've been on record in public meetings where he'll take one stance, I'll take another. Yes, that has happened. And we've continued to have a very good and professional relationship, but do we always agree? No, I don't think. I know in this council, I see oftentimes, I don't see many unanimous votes here.
Once in a while, we all agree. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for the time, and thank you all for your testimony today and your responses.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Majority Leader Taylor, then Councilman Gun Cobbs.
Thank you,
Majority
Mr.
Leader?
President. Over the past few weeks, after every violent incident that occurred in our city where injury or loss of life resulted, we all ran to respond, preparing our quotes and issuing our individual statements, each one long on lament and outrage, but short on solutions beyond the usual calls for change left over from the last tragic incident. By now, we know there is no single solution that will magically prevent these acts of senseless violence from taking place on our streets. The day after 5 people were shot in my ward in the parking lot of the old Stop and Shop Plaza, one that had become a gathering place for unruly late-night activity, I sought out to find the owner of that property and turned out to be former Mayor Joe Paolino. I reached out to him and asked him, what can we do to secure that property to keep the illegal ATVs, dirt bikes, cars playing loud music, you name it, out of there? I also at that time reached out to Chief Clemens of the Providence Police and Assistant Fire Chief Bates from Providence Fire, as well as the principal of Alvarez. And we all formed a meeting at 10 o'clock the next morning at the Stop and Shop parking lot. Mayor Paolino sent 5 people. Police Chief Clemens had the district lieutenant and police officer respond. Assistant Fire Chief Bates had the 2 districts chiefs respond. And together, we developed a plan. The property owner agreed to add more cameras, install gates to limit access to the property. At this time, I would like to thank former Mayor Paolino, as he could have easily said, this is not his problem. But to his credit, he understood the urgency and wanted to be part of the solution, and willingly agreed to get it secured. I will state now, and I have stated in the past, that Mayor Elorza and Commissioner Paré need to untie Chief Clemens' hands and let him run his police department. More importantly, before we call for outside help, we must allow Chief Clemens and his leadership team the ability to do the job we've entrusted them to do. Tonight, I am calling for Commissioner Paré's immediate resignation as he has failed the city of Providence. He has allowed sound public safety policy to be replaced by his own politically motivated agenda, failing the city of Providence as well as the men and women under his command. If we all remember, he failed our state back in 2003 with a smoke shop raid, and now he continues daily to fail the city of Providence. Let's place a true fire chief as the head of the fire department and let Police Chief Hugh Clemens run his department to get our city back in shape. As we've all heard tonight, and I will reiterate, I have the utmost confidence that Chief Clemens can accomplish this task as the men and women of his department trust him. Last year, we had the unfortunate incident with Jamon Galkals in my ward, and for a week straight, the dirt bikes and ATVs were racing up and down Elmwood Avenue late at night to early morning hours. But at the border of Park Avenue and Cranston Street, Elmwood Avenue, Park Avenue and Elmwood Avenue, not too far away, was the Cranston Police Department, the police chief, and the mayor of Cranston. And they were sending the message that you're not coming into our city. Last summer, when peaceful demonstrations gave way to riots throughout downtown, which caused destruction of several businesses that were already struggling because of the COVID pandemic. We were not prepared yet again, and the quote from Commissioner Paré at that time was, we were a bit flat-footed. When you have 300, 400 people, and they are going to storm the mall or any facility, you need to be ready with more than a couple dozen. He didn't see this coming. This went on from 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. the next morning, leaving mass destruction throughout the city of Providence. Things have gotten worse under the direction of Commissioner Paré with ATVs and dirt bikes, pulling out drivers of cars and beating them, terrorizing the city when they are out there. The quote from the commissioner most recently for this incident is, if you come here and think you are going to get away with driving recklessly, eventually we will apprehend you. Commissioner, They've been doing this for 2 years now, and they continue to do it on a daily basis. With all the ATVs and the dirt bikes running amok, the shootings, the stabbings, the armed robberies, the carjackings we hear about daily, as we've heard tonight, the residents of Providence are scared. My constituents are scared. But the difference is they reside in this city. They are not as lucky as you, Commissioner, who work weekdays in the city and go home to the city of Cranston, nights, weekends, and holidays. They have to be here round the clock, and they are afraid. Speaking of Cranston and several other cities, as we've all heard, they will not allow what is going on in their communities. And they have proved it numerous times. When they said they were going to riot Garden City, the mayor at that time and police chief, even the National Guard protected it. Why do we deserve any less? The men and women of the Providence Police Department voted no confidence in you, Commissioner Paré, and I sit here to echo their sentiment tonight and ask my colleagues to do the same. As I have brought up several times, you were never vetted through the current city council, which is yet another violation, this current city council, which is yet another violation of the city charter. So just to end quickly, I know I'm on the finance committee and the current president was the finance chair and Councilwoman Ryan, the finance chairwoman now. We have all said for the last 3 years, instead of doing a 50-person school, do a 20-person school, each year. And then that way we can catch up. If you take a list of, say, 200 people, you could do 10 schools of 20. It's not going to cost more money. Plus, as you know, and I've said for several times, you're the acting fire chief of the city of Providence, and you're not qualified, but that's $1.2 million we've spent over 7 years, and we could hire 24 policemen today with that money. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Majority Leader. Thank you. Mr. Clerk, let the record reflect that Councilman LaFortune is present also.
So noted.
Councilman Goncalves, you have the mic, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. First and foremost, I want to thank the members of the community here, the members of the Providence Police Department for all that you do to serve our communities. My heart also goes out to the families that have been recently impacted. I want to thank Chief Clements. Thank you, Commissioner Perry, FOP President Mr. Amundi, Mr. Huntley, Lieutenant O'Brien from our district, and Lieutenant Default in our district also for their leadership and the important work that they do in the city. I also called for this meeting because many of my constituents do not feel safe. I also grew up in my ward, and I personally would like to put politics aside and think about real sustainable solutions that will keep our communities safe. This isn't about slogans or ideologies or demonizing our police. This is about solving a real problem. That's the recent violence, the gun problems, the ATVs that we're experiencing in our city. People are literally dying. People are afraid. With all the tension that we're experiencing nationally and locally around policing, we need to bridge the gap. And ultimately, I hope that we can work together on real, robust solutions to address this issue. We have to get it right. And we appreciate your expertise and experience in policing. And from your perspective, what more needs to be done? We've heard a lot tonight. But in your opinion, to strengthen the relationship between police and all the communities that we serve here in Providence, particularly our communities of color who may feel a lack of trust in policing right now, what do you think needs to be done better to strengthen the bonds with the community and the police? And if you can elaborate on specifics, whether it's implicit bias training, cultural competency, diversity in your ranks, to ultimately build the trust that we need to see in our communities.
I think you've touched directly on it, Councilman, and thank you for the words about the Providence Police, but the recruitment efforts that we've had in the Providence Police Department, I identified 164 in the schools that have graduated, 101 of minority status. This present academy, 4930 of minority status. That's become a focus, a focal point of the command staff and the commissioner of this police department to direct our attention towards making the men and women more closely reflect the demographics of the city. That's important. Number two, training. People think that police officers are extremely well trained to a high level. And quite frankly, with the burden that we have with chronic addiction, homelessness, mental illness, it quite simply isn't true. We are not trained nearly to the level of trained clinicians. However, that burden has been placed squarely at our feet, has it not? And that being said, I think we've done it to an extremely effective level over the years. You look at the incidents. We look at all these incidents that we're involved in, whether it's respond to the scene of a mentally disturbed person, respond to a disturbance, respond to a man with a gun, all of those. 90 plus to high levels % of those are resolved and they're de-escalated. And that's because of more so, not the training, but the experience of the Providence Police. We recently went through that training, and I want to thank the Rhode Island Foundation and Neil Steinberg. Thank God we have the relationships we do and the connections within our community that we do to foster this type of positive outlook going forward. So we trained the entire Providence Police Department as of last week, including the academy, the recruits in the academy. As far as closer connections with our community, we can't do enough of it. But you know, when I first started to speak about our efforts around diversion with the council, many of the council members, many in the city, did not realize what we had already been doing. We have so many partnerships with social service agencies. As Cedric identified, we've been connected at the hip with the Institute for 18 plus years. I've served on the board for many of those years. To answer your question directly, we can't do enough of it. We have to continue to make those connections in the community. I think the Providence Police Department, the men and women, there are some units in this department, every single day, they're telling me how they're connecting with the community, having conversations, outreach. I want to thank not only the sworn staff of the Providence Police Department, but the civilian staff. And I'll point to, you know, some of the preparation we had for tonight was from that civilian staff. And Tina Shepard, community relations specialist. We do so much in the community. We could send you a template from her and Captain Remolino, all of the outreach we've done in this community. It's pretty impressive. It really is. But to answer your question directly, we can't do enough of it. And we need to continue those conversations. And I think the men and women of the Providence Police Department have always been open to those tough conversations and reform, positive reform to police this city in a better manner.
Thank you for that, Chief. And thanks for all the robust partnerships that we've experienced in the city. As we know, crime and poverty are related. Crime in many cases manifests itself in the lack of educational opportunities, the lack of meaningful employment options, the lack of housing. So education, jobs, keeping our recreation centers open, that's what we hear from our youth and our families. We need to fund and invest and address those root causes. But what do you think we can do and should do as the legislative branch of government to tackle these issues so that we're preventing and also addressing some of the root causes of crime in the first place? This question goes to anyone who is willing to answer it.
It is all about opportunity and resources. And again, I don't think members of the Providence Police can have enough training. But from the council standpoint, funding is a big issue. I can tell you many of the programs that we've run, one in particular, we've had astounding success at in the police department. As an example, the YPI, the Youth Police Initiative. This is a program where we handpick, not us, predominantly we've done this program in public housing, where public housing, and we have a great relationship with Providence Housing Authority and its executive director, they will handpick young men originally, and then later women in those public housing developments who are at risk and generally do not like uniformed members, men and women of the Providence Police Department. And the same for the men and women that work in those neighborhoods, there's a level of distrust. So we ran this YPI program, several sessions. I believe we're up to 13 or 14. We can't do enough of those sessions because every time we do them, and these young men and women, they develop such a relationship with the officers who work in those areas. And by the end of the session, I've gone to every single graduation, and they were offered a dinner and an opportunity to go before the microphone and speak about what they've learned and where they are now. And everyone on the council should go to the next graduation. In this council, I know we've spoken about it, should fund several of these YPIs, because each of these young women who are brave enough to go to the microphone talk about how my new best friend is Jose Pineda, Joe Iannucci, or whoever was their mentor in that program. And at least half of them say, I want to become a Providence police officer. And they started as at-risk youth. And by the end of the program, several of them want to become a Providence police officer. Those type programs. The Providence Police Explorers program, we've run for over 30 years. It is a model in New England. There are over 100 graduates of the Providence Police Explorers program who are now police officers or correctional officers, including as far away as the NYPD, but several on the Providence Police. Those programs, we can't do enough of. They're not all connected with the Institute, but these are all programs that are successful. And those are long-term strategies to keep young men and women away from errant behavior and the wrong path in life. And we've been successful. We can't do enough of it. And any funding the council can give us with the Recovery Act money, especially on YPI, we would love to do one after another. And one more thing with the recovery money, I would love to see members of this council, members of the community, members of the media, to go through our next several sessions. We want to keep the academy staff in place and run some citizens academies. And I really want you to see how truly dynamic, unpredictable, dangerous this job is, and run you through scenarios. It's a tough assignment out there. It really is. And I think it would be helpful for the council.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing those stories. I actually spoke to a police officer recently, and he lives in the city, grew up in the city, a male of color, his children, decided to do the job, to serve the community, to change the narrative around policing. And he told me that morale across the department is low. It's a tough job. He might not come back home to his family. Are you hearing that from other officers of color, particularly from Providence? And what are the implications for that? Are you seeing recidivism in people leaving the job early, especially some of our more diverse officers?
No question at this moment, members of the police department, including me, are frustrated, we're demoralized, and that goes right to every young officer on the job. That's because of national and local conversations. And I think I've touched upon it, that I know we can do better in this city. And we have solutions. There is a fix here. There really is. ATVs is a really complicated, tough issue, but on crime and bringing the police department more closely connected with the community. We're very connected. I mean, however, we can't do enough of it. There are so many groups that we connect with, but morale is extremely low. It's I won't say it's as low as it's ever been, but around the country, police officers are demoralized, and that's happened here. I think police officers are about to leave in much larger numbers. I don't think the city of Providence should let that happen. You know, I think we should pick it up. I think, like Cedric says, like we've all said, we have an opportunity to move forward, and I know that we can. I mean, we all love this city. And I think we have an opportunity from this point on to move it forward in a positive way with some of these long-term strategies. And we'll always have the short-term issues and react to crime. Right? We have our long-term strategies, our short-term strategies, but we always have to deal with what's happening at the moment. And we're dealing with that right now.
Thank you. Might I add, this officer is really dedicated to the community. This is a community guy, and so I thought that was very telling.
I might expand upon what some of the colonel was touching on. You know, the program that for the youth, that's a great program, and he touched on community civilian police academy, which I was going to bring up. But I would also task, you know, some of the council members, if they'd like, to go along on a ride along with officers for several days, so they can see exactly how the community and the you know, officers interact with each other, and to see the behavioral patterns between both. You know, it might be eye-opening, it might be enlightening, it might be horrifying. Who knows? It could be any one of those things. But I think it would give everybody in this room a better grasp of what Providence police officer goes through on a daily basis. And I think it would be very instrumental in, you know, helping you to better understand what it is to be a police officer and what you deal with on a daily basis, rather than just seeing it in the news or hearing people's opinions on it. You can live it for yourselves and make your own determinations and decisions. I think that'd be a great starting place. To expand on some of the other things, you know, we have youth services, you know, police officers in the school resource officers. You know, there's been some conversations going back and forth of whether we should have them, whether we shouldn't have them, whatnot. Those officers in the schools are the gap, the bridge for that gap between youth and adulthood. And the bonds that they form with a lot of those youths in the city translates into how they're going to view police officers when they become into adulthood. It is a unit that doesn't get a lot of praise, but they should, because the work they do affects people, future generations in the city, and they do amazing work. And I want to just touch on that because, you know, we don't need to get rid of them in the schools. We need to keep them in the schools because they're an extra tool that helps to educate the children in that school as to police officers can be your friends and will be your friends, you know, but they'll also hold the line when you do something wrong. And they give them that, listen, you're going to be held accountable, but we're here to help you get you through it as well. So those things there, and to touch upon, you know, officers leaving the job and whatnot. Right now, you have a large group of officers who are seeking positions elsewhere. You know, and it's terrible to say that because Providence foots the bill for training these officers. And I believe I had this conversation going back almost a year ago with Councilwoman Harris on a Zoom call. And I explained to her that, you know, we train these officers and we pay for these officers to be trained and we get them through their probationary period. And then they just go somewhere else, you know, and that impacts our ranks. And it's not fair to the city that they leave and go elsewhere. But the catalyst for them leaving and going elsewhere is the atmosphere that they work in. Okay, and not feeling support. And as you know, Mr. Huntley said, support. You have to support, just like we have to support the community. We have to support, you know, the citizens. You have to support your police as well. And that's going to bring morale up. And if morale is up high on this job as police officers, you're going to retain the best officers you have. You're going to retain them. They're not going to leave and go other places. We've had 3 officers in the last month leave to go to the Veterans Administration. 3 veteran officers leave because they didn't want to deal with Providence anymore. You know, we've had at least 10 officers in the last 2 years leave to go other places, more than that, actually. Mass State Police, Connecticut, South Kingston. We have people in the process to go in other places in Rhode Island right now that have only been on the job for a year or 2. That's not positive. That's not good. We need to do everything we can to keep the officers here once we train them and make it a place where they feel, you know, supported and where the morale is not rock bottom. I know the colonel said he doesn't believe it's the worst it's ever been. In the 26 years plus I've been here, it's the worst it's ever been for me, morale on this job. It is absolutely at the bottom of your shoes. That's where it's at. So
Well,
we need to
there-
do more to help, as we move forward and do more to help the community, we also need to do help, help for the officers as well to show support.
Sure, and I'd love to talk more about the
Follow-up
SRO
question?
conversation at some point.
Follow-up?
So with over 400 officers that we currently have on the force, some of the things that I often hear are about basic quality of life issues, the noise, the stray pipes, not just the ATVs, that's not being addressed. What do you think that we could be doing differently?
Directed patrols. So as it pertains to straight pipes, whether it be on Thayer Street or Atwells Avenue, I know that Newport has done a lot around that initiative. I spoke with a lieutenant from Newport the other day, and we're ready to address some of those issues in those hot button areas, whether it be South Main Street, South Water Street, and to posting. So it's education within the community. So we need signage on Thayer Street, Atwells Avenue, in the areas where we're having issues with motorcycles, with a straight pipe issue, and then give our officers who are on directed patrols the latitude to enforce it. Look, I said it in the beginning, what we should be doing as a police department is problem-oriented policing, going to neighborhood meetings, listening to the problems in the neighborhood, and then directing our patrols towards those issues. Quite simply, we're at a critically low number right now, and we're having a very, very, very difficult time in doing that. When we go plus 50, plus 49, November 6th, and once they get through their FTO training, and once we announce another academy, and once we divert some of the challenges that had been put on the police, I know we've talked about more diversion in the police department, and maybe taking away some of the challenges that we have, like that, they're lower level, and maybe police officers don't have to respond to, maybe civilians could respond to. We've embraced that, but that's all funding, and that's going to take time to put into place. So maybe, off the top, we could talk about eliminating responding to accidents, which is a high volume of what we do. Eliminating the type of calls that we respond to that maybe a clinician or civilian could respond to as it relates to noise. But I caution, some of these events that we respond to that are minor in nature, at some point, you need a policeman nearby because the clinicians will tell you that. So again, much of it is centered around resources.
All right, my last question is, the nation's murder rate rose by almost 25% last year. If you look at the data in large cities, increases in homicides are spiking across the country, and that's exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, obviously. That's alarming. Is Providence safe?
The last couple of weeks, there have been incidents. Certainly, you could certainly say the woman surrounded by the ATVs and the horrific acts of violence that we've seen, of course, that you don't consider Providence safe. But generally speaking, you look at the data. Look, each number is a victim, and we can't lose sight of that. But big picture, look at the data, look at the month to month, look at the 5-year average. Providence can be a much safer city, but in general, the data will show you Providence is a safe city.
Thank you, Chief. And thank you for answering my questions. And, I ultimately hope that we can work together to figure out the solutions and do everything that we can to keep the residents of the city safe. Thanks, Council President.
Thank you. Thanks, Council President. Council President Pro Tem Espinal, then Councilwoman Miller.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, everyone. Members of the press, dear colleagues, and also community members. The violence in Providence has got to stop. We just passed a budget for $540 million that does great investments in a different area that we as an urban city need to put in place in order to keep the city moving forward. But when the public does not feel safe, it all falls apart. This is why this has got to stop. When I listened to Mr. Amandi and the chief speak, I'm a little confused because it almost sounds like they're speaking about two different departments. Mr. Amandi talks about one that has challenges, that it's lacking resources, that their hands are tied. And then the chief talks about a department that, although having challenges, it's moving forward, it's working. And he went on to say that more police does not necessarily equate less violence. Is that correct, Chief?
That portion of it is correct, but more policing does equate to more community-oriented policing, which we haven't provided in the form of foot posts, directed patrols, which are the real means in which you employ community-oriented policing to address quality of life issues.
So it's not just necessary because you have a larger number of police, doesn't mean
For
that you
violent
have
crime, for violent,
Exactly.
because we've seen some of our numbers will go down, even though we have a lesser number of officers year to year. But as far as employing community policing efforts in the community and quality of life issues, absolutely. It affects the operations of the Providence Police Department when you lose those resources.
Thank you, Chief. All right, so all the measures that we're talking about tonight, sounds to me, we're reacting to crime, you know, and, but I don't hear anything about being proactive. See, I don't, Councilman Goncalves touched upon something that I wanted to talk about, which is the root cause of crime, which is the poverty, which is the lack of education. Our kids are attending a school system that has failed. The 98% of our kids cannot read or write at grade level. There's lack of opportunities and all the everything else that we know about. So what do we think or expect is going to happen in the years to come? So we're reacting today to things that we knew about, but nothing was done. You see? So we need to keep that in mind, because this lack of opportunity for our children, our youth, is really going to carry a lot of weight in what happens in the future. Some of the individuals involved in the latest shootings, I had 9 people that were shot on Carolina Avenue. That's in my ward. I believe one of those kids was 14 years old, which tells me that 10 years ago, he was in pre-K at 4. Another one was 18. I think the other one was 23. So 10 years ago, elementary school, middle school. So at some point during that time is when we fail those kids. And unless we address that, we'll be here every single year having the same type of conversation. I get it. We do have an uptick in crime and it needs to be addressed. And we can give all the tools in the world that the police department needs to address that, because the violence needs to stop. So I'm not saying that I'm here against the police or the work that they're doing. I'm saying that when you empower the police to do the job and to take care of the crime that's there today, at the same time, we need to put something in place that is going to stop the crime tomorrow. Because if we keep failing our kids, you're going to have a lot more victims out there. No one should die just because they happen to be standing on the street talking to someone, right? No one should be at home because they live in fear. So let's deal with the current situation that we have, and let's deal with the root cause of the problem. That's the only way we're going to get this. If not, our city is just going to fall apart. So we need to address that. So let's put a plan together, because I have not heard about a plan. We'll leave here tonight, but there's no serious plan here. So when we draft that plan, let's do a 2-part. Current situation, we give the police the tools that they need to deal with this. And let's talk about our children. Let's put that part of the plan. so that tomorrow they can walk on safe streets. Tomorrow they can have a good future. And we already begun at the council. Yes, we did pass the budget that included millions of dollars that's going to go into youth empowerment. It's going to go into early childhood learning. It's gone into employment for the youth. But we did this year. Let's keep on doing it every year. And let's make it a commitment that we are going to address this. And perhaps in the next year, in a few years ahead, we'll be able to see the fruit of that. We won't be here talking about what are we going to do about the uptick in crime. They will be here celebrating because we'll have a city that works and that works for everyone. That's what we need. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, President.
Thank you,
Pro
Mr. Amandi. Thank you.
Just asking me to be aware of the time and the hour, please. So I apologize. Councilwoman Miller, then Councilwoman LaFortune, then Councilman Anthony. Okay, Councilwoman Miller, you have the mic.
Thank you, Mr. President. And yeah, I do want to thank everyone for being here tonight. And I just want to start by also sharing my sincere condolences to Councilman Narducci for the loss of our city sergeant, for the loss of your good friend. We will all miss him, and my condolences go out to his family. I also, just before I start, want to say to you, Councilman Narducci, I would very much love to bring you to Federal Hill to have a dinner on a Friday or Saturday night where there has been a really remarkable, celebration of our city's resilience in the face of some really difficult times. And so, this is the second time you mentioned it, and it would be remiss to not say, come have dinner with us, because it's a pretty good scene on there. So that's it, Colonel Clements. I want to thank you also for these graphs that are up front, and ask you if you could provide those. Somehow those ones that are at the overall crime trends are not in our packets. So if you could please provide those to the council office. It is very heartening, given the very difficult time we've had over the last couple of months, to see that overall trend of both, total crime just going down year after year. And so I would like to have that for the record. So thank you. There's a lot been said tonight. I'm not going to try and reiterate anything. I want to say specifically, when we talk about violent crime, we have an opportunity to bring many more people to this table. And so while I really appreciate your time tonight, and I appreciate you coming to talk to us and to the public, there have got to be more voices, Mr. President, as we talk about solutions to this. Many people around the country, and I think we would be well served by thinking about it this way as well, consider violent crime to be a public health issue. Consider it to be an epidemic, right? And by that I mean, when violent crime starts happening, as it has in Providence, as it has around the country, we see not just one incident, but more incidences, right? And so the way we know something about handling a public health crisis right now, right? The way that we counter that, the way that we engage that, the way that we take it on is by engaging the whole community, is by very much by engaging the people who are at risk of engaging in violence or other behaviors, people who are at risk of recidivism and potentially re-entering the criminal justice system. We do it by straight on engagement. And there's lots of models. So I want to just introduce folks to a model called violence interruption that is well engaged in places around the country. It means exactly what it says, violence interruption. More often than not, it is a non-police response, right? It is alongside other city and police responses, but it is a community-led path to engage directly where violence is happening, where we know that people are at risk. Similar to, I really appreciate Pro Tem Espinal's comments about wanting to make the future better. I think we have an opportunity to make the now better, right? That we're not just talking about the children as much as we do have to engage in these long-term questions and these long-term problems for the kids in our schools. We have an opportunity to engage the people right now who are, and I don't think we come out of this without doing that. And so it's a community leader response, right? It's kind of old school community leader response, right? Where we're engaging community leaders to engage their neighborhoods. And there's lots of ways we can do that at the city level, so models like this have had a huge impact in places like Chicago, right? A community impact in Chicago saw a 50% reduction in gun crimes when using a violence interruption strategy, right? A 50% in a city we know to have a tremendous problem with violence. On the city level, I think that we can provide a backbone, a kind of scaffold of support for initiatives like this, right? I think we can provide, so right now, in our rec centers, I think one of the jewels of the city of Providence is our recreation centers. We don't have a lot of programming. Once you hit 12, you gotta you gotta go join your school team. We don't have a lot of programming, but we have an opportunity to engage young people from 12 to 18, right? Who are hungry for it. And the thing that we haven't really talked a lot about tonight, although we started to allude to it, is in the last, there's something else that's happened in the last 18 months. And that is that as the COVID pandemic took over, the bottom fell out for a lot of people who depended on the social interactions in school, who depended on the social supports they got in school, in our rec centers, in all of these both formal and informal interactions they have in the community. And so, I'm not sure what more we could have done to, given the extreme public health situation we were facing, but I do think that we failed a pretty significant portion of our community that has counted on those interactions for a long time. So all of this to say, I think there is more we can do in this moment right now. I think I would love to have many more conversations about violence interruption strategies and how, as a city, we can support them, and as a community, we can bring those voices to the table to also support. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Miller. Next, Councilman LaFortune. And Councilman Anthony.
Thank you, Council President. I too want to express my sincere condolences to our beloved sergeant's family, as well as to Councilman Narducci. We all know that the sergeant, he would go above and beyond in his duties, and he truly served all of us on council. So this is a great loss for all of us. And thank you for recognizing him. I also want to thank the commissioner, the chief, FOP President Imandi. I've had the pleasure of spending time with all of you. Mr. Armandi, on several occasions, you and I have had coffee. We've talked. Sometimes we agreed on things. Sometimes we did not. Both the chief and the commissioner, I always say that you might get sick of me because we talk almost weekly. I've invited you and the district lieutenant to my community meetings. Pre-pandemic, you've come to my home for dinner with my family and members of the community. I've had the opportunity to go on a couple of ride-alongs with the police department. I've also had an opportunity to go on ride-alongs with the Nonviolence Institute. And Cedric, I am just so happy to see you here and also appreciate the work that the Institute is doing in the community as well. And also all the police officers, the work that they're doing. So I first want to say that I agree with my council colleagues in regards to the state police coming to Providence. One, I think it shows a lack of confidence in Providence ability, our police department or public safety's leadership ability, as well as the members of the police department's ability to address this issue. One thing that Mr. Cedric said was relationships. And we've been having the same conversations about the same issues for quite some time. I also had an opportunity, and even before this meeting, because I reached out to both the commissioner and the chief, to look at the data to look at the trend of violence. And thank you, Councilwoman Miller, for also bringing up the point that, we want to see more data. So when we did have close to 500 police officers, there was the violence rate in the city of Providence was much higher. We also see that there was a downward trend over the course of the years, yet during a global pandemic, we saw an influx of violence. During that time, all of our rec centers were closed. Kids were forced to learn from home, so they weren't going into schools. And in fact, I spoke with teachers. Some kids weren't present during the Zoom meetings. And then when we started transitioning back to the classroom and with the alternative schedules, the older kids, a lot of them weren't coming to school. These classes were empty. We didn't have as many after-school programs or initiatives that were functioning. So gun violence is a public health issue. I talked to Dr. Rainey about this, and she also agreed that it was a public health issue. We have seen an influx of illegal guns, to my council colleague's point, on the streets. I've testified at the State House. I've been with both the commissioner and the chief testifying at the State House so that we can reduce access to these illegal guns and also have accountability measures put in place at the state level to hold people accountable who purchase these guns so that they don't fall in the wrong hands. There were 13 homicide victims last year. As I'm sitting here, I'm thinking about, since the time I was elected to council in 2017, all the funerals that I have gone to with kids laying in caskets, babies, victims of homicide. Some are adults. I'm thinking about William Parson, how kids, his fellow classmates from both Central and PCTA, and you know what? They had an SRO, watched him die. I think about the young man who was living, I believe was in Newport. He was Dominican. He came to Providence to see his family at the Roger Williams Project, and he was by the door, and the bullet hit him, which wasn't intended for him. And this was a young man who was sending money to the DR to take care of his family. Beautiful, beautiful young man, beautiful. I think about Tatiana Francois, although she didn't live in Providence, she lived in Cranston. Her family church was in Providence. She did a lot in Providence. She was shot and killed in Pawtucket. She was my daughter's Sunday school teacher. All she was doing was sitting in a car talking to her cousin, and she lost her life. I think of Maya. I went to see her family last Monday. I also went to the wake. And I remember talking to her father, and he said, she's right here in the casket, and I still cannot believe it. I think about the young man who was with her, who moved her so afraid that they would come back, and she died in his arms, the trauma that he's experienced. And he shared with me that just last year, he lost his 2-month-old child to MRSA. The impact of violence is severe, it's long-term. And what I'm seeing now is that many people, particularly those of marginalized communities, are so accustomed to seeing it that all emotions are erased. They become desynthesized. I've spoken to the chief about even the impact on police officers. Officer Verdi shared with me how hard it was because he was familiar with the family and how difficult it has to be when you have to go respond to a violent crime. And when you look at the person, the victim, and realize that that person could be your own child. That has to be difficult.
Councilwoman, I just want to remind you.
I understand. I understand. And everyone else, there's a bunch.
No, a second.
Mhm.
I just want to ask if you have some questions, could you please?
I do.
Thank you.
There were many
And-
people
and
who had
I
statements
know.
before. I just want to also have my fair share.
I appreciate it.
Thank
I'm-
you.
I'm trying to be fair to everybody. It's getting in the hour. We have other
Thank,
councilmen.
we've
Just
been here
getting-
for a long time.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
just
you.
ask if you have
So-
a question, please ask.
Thank you, President, but I'm going to finish my statement because we've allowed other people to do so with all due respect. So thank you for that. Because guess what? I know what it feels to lose someone to gun violence. I know what it feels when people don't report it. I know that feeling. Every time I go to these funerals, every time one of these young people, anyone who experienced gun violence, it hurts me deeply. It does. So I understand the time. I have patiently sat here in this poor air quality.
Thank you for your.
So thank you.
You can continue.
Thank you. So just going back to the point is all of the contributing factors, people mentioned it. The lack of investments in our schools are underfunded. Many of our rec centers are closed or falling apart. In fact, I went to the Elmwood Rec Center. No one has invested in it for how many years now? Southside, a couple of years ago, flooded. Billy Taylor, part of it. There's mold. So all of these things contribute to the violence that's happening in our community. So it's not an issue that can be resolved with policing. And also, if we're going to spend our tax dollars, right, we also have to think about a comprehensive strategic approach that includes public safety, the police department, but that also includes community resources. The Nonviolence Institutes, their outreach workers or street workers have reduced significantly over the past few years. There are programs right now, like Princess to Kings, which was developed as a prison divergent program. You have Oasis International. You have Pastor Howard Jenkins started the Alternative to Violence program. There's John Hope Settlement, which used to be an entity in the community that would have lock-ins to prevent like feuds between gangs. There are programs that Mr. Santos with the Chad Brown Association that is mentoring our youth. None of them are here. None of them are here. Community policing is about building a relationship with the community. You can have 100 officers on foot, but if they don't know the community that they're serving and everyone is not working to cultivate those relationships, if a crime happens, people are not going to report. People are not going to engage. What's missing here? It's the comprehensive strategic approach to addressing the violence in our city. I'm hearing that you're asking for more resource, but no one's telling us how those resources are going to be used. We're calling in the state police, but yet you haven't told us what are some things that's going to be done to address the ATVs. We've been talking about that for how long now? I too am tired of seeing the violence. Providence is my hometown. My parents have been in the same house for 30 years. So I will always choose Providence. And I feel safe because this is my home. My home. But I also don't want to fear standing outside and someone pulling a gun at me. So what I want to hear, what I want to see is what are you going to do to increase accountability and transparency as part of building those relationships? How are you going to work with the community-based organizations that are actually doing the work in the community with limited resources? How are we going to cultivate that so that everyone feels a part? Because public safety has a key word, the public, which means it's all of our responsibility. And I do apologize for taking a bit of time. I grew up,
Councilwoman, you have one more minute. And then
Thank you.
I have the next council person.
I grew up on the south side of Providence in Washington Park. I come from a working class family. My father, at 73 years old, is still a certified nursing assistant. There might be people here, my dad took care of your family members. I've seen crime. I've witnessed it. I shouldn't be here today. I shouldn't. So what I do hope is that we take that strategic approach. And yes, support public safety, but also support and invest in our neighborhoods, in our community, because that's how you're going to address the problem. And I do hope that you can share the data and information that I requested.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Next, Councilwoman Anthony.
Yes, thank you so much. First of all, I'd also like to express my condolences to my fellow councilmen. We miss the sergeant already. I missed the fact that he didn't pass out our packets, that we had Mary Lee do it in his stead tonight. It was very, very sad. So I am so sorry. I'd also like to thank the commissioner, the colonel. I'd like to thank President Amande and Executive Director Huntley for your comments tonight, which I think have been very, very helpful. So I truly also appreciate all the comments of my colleagues. I think we've all spoken from our hearts tonight. We're all here for one purpose, and that is to protect our citizens. So, and I would like to give one shout out to Lieutenant Default also, who has been an excellent liaison to the East Side. He has done a tremendous job and made himself available constantly. So I'm so appreciative. So I think we all know that safety is an issue in all our neighborhoods. Some of our residents do not feel safe in the presence of police. Other residents are demanding a greater police presence on their street. So the question we're trying to address tonight is, how do we do public safety? And so I think we've had a lot of really, really good comments tonight. How do we work together to make our communities more peaceful and more equitable for everyone? So I really believe that we have the right people tonight here speaking. Colonel, I believe in your leadership. I appreciate what you've accomplished. What I've heard tonight is that what I was most concerned about is making sure that we were being responsive to our citizens in terms of police reform. I understand and appreciate the need for more officers. I have supported the police contract. I supported the current academy. I look forward to the graduation date on November 6th. My concern was the allocation of money for the recruiting the next academy without having discussed positive reform. And what I learned tonight from you is that you're already doing positive reform. You're starting it. I've heard tonight that, you know, we have a more diverse academy. You would like more police training, which I think is so important. You welcome more opportunities to divert police from non-criminal matters. I mean, these are all things that we have been talking about in terms of police reform. So I know that we have the right person in charge. I think we are going to work on these and be a better city for it. So I really, really appreciate all your efforts. And Commissioner, I appreciate yours too. I have a very, very quick question, a couple of follow-up questions, just so my constituents can better understand. Of the 404 police officers, I'm wondering how many are deployed at one time in the city, if you can answer that question.
It's a complicated answer. We have a minimum manning provision within the CBA, but that is for patrol officers only. So during the daytime, the number is smaller than at nighttime, but the highest minimum manning number in the city is 27. So we have 32 car posts in this city. So like in your ward, District 8 and District 9, there are 3 and 3. So there are 6 car posts up on the east side. There are 32 car posts in the city. The only requirement of the city is to fill 27 patrol officers on a shift. Now, that's a little bit complicated. So when you ask the question, how many police officers are on at any given time? There are several times that we go out way under the 32 car posts that we have in the city. So, however, what we do have, like on a Friday night, we'd have more than the 27. We might have 27 or 30, but as well, we'd have detectives, narcotics. We'd have some traffic services out there. Much lower numbers than we used to have. So at any given time, you could have 50 or 60 Providence police officers out there. But in patrol, answering calls, we're as low as 20 and 27 during the witching hour, which is critical and dangerous. So the minimum manning number is 27 when you have 32 car posts, and that's a problem.
And I guess my follow-up question on that is until the academy graduates on November 6th, is there any opportunity for the deployment of maybe more officers in some way?
Yeah, so we've done that. We strategize every other day. I mean, we're a data-driven organization, and where we have to pull narcotics or detectives to perform other functions than their normal assignment, we've done that. And, you know, we have 404 officers, minus the 36 that are out, military leave and IOD and other. But we're pulling those resources together. As you can see with the numbers up top, we've been here before in these critically low numbers. But I do want to qualify that although there have been times in this city when we've had higher complements of numbers and crime could be lower or the same in some of those years, we have not provided the same community policing services. And I think for us to be an effective and true community-oriented policing department, we should have foot posts in every neighborhood, and we should be a problem-oriented policing department in that we should be going to community meetings and addressing your particular needs.
So I'm sorry, just one follow-up question. So that you have 32 car posts. So you're saying we have no foot posts out in the streets
We
right
have
now?
foot posts downtown, but as the councilwoman said, Councilwoman LaFortune, we put out foot posts on rare occasion, but it's not effective in that you should have the same 2 foot posts in your ward, in your neighborhood, on the 4 tours of duty that they're working. So tonight, if it's Clements and Verdi, and tomorrow night, if it's Monday and Parry, and the next night it's Iannucci and Greeley, then there's really no connection to the community. We put them out in overtime fashion. The way it should work is it's Clements and Verdi for the 4 nights that they're working. The whole community knows they're going on what their days off are. It became so effective that even the criminals knew what our days off were. And we would utilize overtime to throw them off, to show that, all right, they know we're off Thursday and Friday this week, but we'll have directed patrols. Everyone knew when they were working, everyone knew their first name, everyone knew how many children they had, who their children were. That's effective. And that addresses the real comprehensive needs in the community. And lastly, I'll say, look, all of these challenges, we're all spot on. And every time we spoke about our successes at press conferences, including our accreditation and all of we always ask our partners to stand with us, to be part of the celebrations. But this is a shared responsibility with the challenges that we have now. And the challenges Councilman Espinal spoke about, it's a shared responsibility. We will never be able to arrest our way out of any single issue, and we know that. And that's not our intent. It's a shared responsibility.
May I ask one more question?
One more
It's
question,
just on the
Councilman Anthony.
motorcycles.
One more
not gonna-
question, Councilman Anthony. then,
Yeah, I'm just not
Deputy
going to
Majority
talk
Leader
about
Harris.
ATVs. I just wanted, because you've answered those questions, and I appreciate that there's a strategy that you can't share, but that there's a strategy on ATVs. But I would like to know on motorcycles, the noise modifications that are being made on motorcycles. Why is it that our car post or our police officers can't pull these motorcycles over and ticket them?
Those, we can, and
Okay.
we have, but to really target the volume, like in certain areas, years ago, it was Thayer Street, and we had an initiative that truly targeted straight pipes and motorcycles maliciously revving their engines. I know occasionally it's become a problem on Atwells Avenue. I just last week spoke to our detail officers on Atwells Avenue. They said they really haven't encountered it in a big fashion, but I've heard from residents up there that they have seen it. So I think what's helpful in everything that we do, again, we're not going to arrest our way out of it. We're not going to summons our way out of it. We need signage. We need education at the top of the street, the bottom of the street, to cite the law. Those with straight pipes and maliciously revving their motorcycles in a short message. And knowing that when we go up and we measure their pipes after we've seen and we've heard the loud mufflers, that they're going to be cited. So it's like we did with the speed bumps in India Point. That became effective as we addressed the drag racing. That was a successful operation. And we can do similar with the straight pipes and the motorcycles. Look, we're never going to stop every single one of them, but in the real hot pocket areas like Thayer Street, Atwells Avenue, in other areas, we can address it.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Just to expand upon. what
Thank you,
the Colonel's
Councilman
saying-
Anthony.
I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm going to Deputy Majority Leader Harris, if I could. I understand everybody's been very patient, but it is getting hot in the hour, and we have another meeting upon this rise. Deputy Majority Leader Harris.
Well, I will be quick. I can be quick. However, my relationship with the Providence Police Department goes back to 1998. Oh, you're shaking your head. And I also have a colleague that's in the audience who should be shaking his head as well. So I gotta say that all of this is happening in right now in our community, in our society, has a lot to do with what people are painting as a narrative of who is responsible. One of the things I do want to say that I have acknowledged since I've been here in the council, as a council person, there's not a lot of starting with the man or the woman in the mirror. Michael Jackson had that. I like to do that. First, start with your own accountability, who you are. When I got in office, because of my longtime relationship with the chief, in fact, President Imani, when I got in office, he was in your seat. He was a fraternal order of police. We weren't happy with each other at one time. You know, I wasn't really, I had a lot on my mind, and I had a lot of frustration. A lot of that frustration was not a lot of thinking or being proactive. Councilman, you said it so well, being proactive and thinking about how do we really address issues. I got a little uncomfortable when throughout the whole social unrest around this season, I was very, very uncomfortable. I think I made it very clear to quite a bit of my colleagues about how uncomfortable I was with the term defund the police. And what did that really mean? I guess if I was an organizer at the time and I was a person who was organizing people around, what do we talk about in a time like this with social, racial injustice? I probably would talk about racism, probably would talk about that. Then I would probably talk about some of the things that I see in our social crisis of people unhoused people without shelter, our children that go back and forth each and every day and monitor these people who are laying anywhere for rest, their mental behavior. I want to thank you too, Councilwoman Miller, for talking about this being also a health issue, because I've been thinking a lot about that. I was thinking a lot about that ever since Officer Allen was killed back in, I think, early part of 2000. And at that time, I want to also say, Councilwoman Miller, you were right. The police did, and Chief, you remember this very well, they did spend a lot of time with the community. And the community called upon a person who had the skills to deal with mental illness at that time. Am I wrong? They called upon, and it was the community itself who drove that. I don't know what happened within a period of time, since the time that we were going through so many changes over a period of time, since '98. And then watching our police departments working with the community slowly change. I did see a change. So much so that the accreditation became a part of it. And I gotta say that the community was also a part of that as well. Because the community called for what they felt like real change looked like to them. And I believe the police department listened. I believe the police department heard. Since I've been in office, I noticed that it's not a lot of that community relationship between police and community. Now, I'm not talking about council people and their community meetings. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what it used to be when there was really, police really engaging in different things that when things happen, really came out. I remember many of those meetings. And those meetings did lead to accreditation and for us to get that. We do know that everywhere else around the globe, there is less response of how community and police get together, less than what we have here in Providence. I mean, I've seen a lot of building here in Providence. I've seen it over and over and over, good or bad indifference. I want to say that when I got in office, I felt comfortable enough to say to the chief, because I had long years of relationship and growing to know each other and growing towards the community and watching how the community itself have made a big impact on who we are here in Providence. I asked him to send me some good people. I said, send me some good people to my neighborhood. No crazy people. I don't want no crazy. I don't want crazy in my neighborhood. I want someone who would come to my neighborhood and help meet with my neighbors, talk to my neighbors, get to know my neighbors, calm things down. I'm gonna be honest with you, I have a challenging neighborhood, a very challenging neighborhood. You don't have to ask me what the police go through every day. You don't have to ask me, because I'm gonna tell you, just walking through my neighborhood sometime is very, very challenging for me. So I wanna say that, yes, we need to have something proactive in place, but I feel very, very, very uncomfortable about the Providence Police not being given the opportunity for more police to be there, or the tools that they need, or going back to the time when things were changing in the police department because people were getting together and coming together in the neighborhood. Back in those days, way before 2013 that I got here. So what I would like to say is that if in my neighborhood, and this is me speaking on my behalf, and this is my humble opinion, with the state police coming, and I know many of you feel like that's the answer, no more violence. Once they come, those ATV bikes, maybe they'll chase them, I don't know. I don't know what the situation will be, but I do know that it will probably cause more and more frustration, problems, and worthy for me, simply because the average Mr. Joe, who has a broken tail light, that maybe my lieutenant already know who he is, know that the man is a hardworking man, but probably got kids and probably can't afford that tail light, will not stop that man. But I do know that I will be getting more and more calls from my constituents because of the fact, somebody said it early, Where there's poverty, of course, there's crime. But yeah, we're in a position right now, we can fix that and we can do it together. I like the whole conversation around the collaboration, working together. I like the idea of us thinking about it together and not just saying, okay, this is fix all. Get the state police here, you do your thing, and that's it, we off the hook. No. I think there's a lot of things that we could do even better ourselves as council people. And that's my humble opinion. I've seen this stuff over and over play out. I've been around a very long time. I've seen when people get together and work together, especially here in Providence, where we all know each other. You might not know Joseph today, you'll know him maybe by tomorrow, because that's how we are connected here in Providence. So, Officer Joseph, talking about him, he's over there, I've seen him, that's what I'm talking about. All right, and I think right now, there gotta be a little bit more thinking about exactly what do we expect and what you expect of the other police when they do come into our neighborhood. Is there gonna be even more backlash? Because sometimes people get mixed up who's stopping who. I remember one time when the state police was here and I had to say to people, no, that was not your municipal police that stopped you. You know what I mean? So we just gotta be clear that we're not causing more harm. To every action, there's a reaction. I just want to leave it at that. I know we've done talked all night, and I just had to get that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Majority Leader. Councilman Vargas.
Thank you for being here. I am brand new in the council, and I want to say thank you for being here. And my heart and my prayers goes to the family of this great person who passed away, and also goes to the families who've been hurt in the city of Providence. What I want to see is change. Commissioner Perry, you got the last word. You got the power to do it. And you got people who can follow your orders. You know how to make it and how to do it. We don't see no plans yet, but I know you guys working on a plan. Hope will be a great plan. Please put it together and let it be, and let's work together. As a city council, I support the police. I want more police. I wish we can have a class every 6 months, but we have to follow the rules. So let's work together. We know you have the tools, you have the resource. Yes, put the plan together and let's work and let's get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any further questions? I just have a couple of follow-up and then we'll conclude the meeting very quickly. First, I want to thank everybody for participating this evening and also my council colleagues. Just the first couple of questions. I just want to make sure. Right now, Chief Clements, you mentioned, you said the President Academy will graduate this November. Is that correct?
Correct.
And you said right now you could begin the process of vetting a new academy as we speak today, starting this week?
Correct.
Okay. Does the commission need to approve that process?
We've had these conversations. We're ready to move almost immediately.
Commissioner, I'm going to ask you on the record, on the oath, will you commit to beginning that process?
Yes.
Thank you. So hopefully not next year when goes before the finance committee, we hear the money was used for something else. So now we'll do that process, right? Chief Clements, I just want to make sure I got it clear. You said in order to provide the type of policing, you mentioned foot patrolling, community policing, et cetera. And Councilman Deputy Majority Harris is correct. That's when I met her way back when, and it was all about that, bringing back, actually creating community policing, right? You said that to a minimum that you need at least 450 officers. Is that correct?
Correct.
Presently, you have 403. Approximately 30 of them are on IOD or military leave, which means you're down to like 370.
Approximately.
So that's
yes.
where we are right now. Okay. And so therefore, you cannot create the type of community policing. I can tell you, at least for my constituents, and I've been going to the neighborhoods also, I've been demanding. which is creating, and I'll get into the definition. This way I don't have to. It's called the ability to understand and share the feelings of another. Community policing is about empathy. It always has, always will be. It worked back then, it can work today. And you just mentioned a second ago, where you have a constant change. You don't always have a particular officer on a particular foot patrol every time, so they can't get to know Mr. So-and-so who owns a business. Mrs. So-and-so is on the third floor. They don't get to know they don't become the fabric of the community. It's not easy because you don't have enough police officers to do that. Is that correct?
That is correct.
May I ask you this other question? Do we have a foot patrol dedicated to the pedestrian bridge in Providence?
Yes, we have a permanent detail assigned over there, yes.
Do we have a foot patrol dedicated on Pecasset Avenue,
No,
Hartford Avenue?
No.
Plainfield Street. My point is, we have foot patrol dedicated to a pedestrian bridge in downtown Providence, but we don't have enough bodies to do foot patrols in our neighborhoods. And I don't blame you, Chief. I blame the fact that we need to keep on getting the academies and have the people to do that job. That's a fact. I'm glad that the pedestrian bridge is being protected. I know there's cameras on it, both ends. I know there was a public outcry because ATV riders are going up and down the pedestrian bridge. But meanwhile, in my neck of the woods, Nunaconic Park, we all read about it. We had a family get injured because of the ATV riders. So I'm glad the pedestrian bridge is safe, but I'm not happy the fact that our neighborhoods are not. That's the reality. What I am concerned about is this. It's clearly law enforcement has been able to eradicate organized crime, take care of some of the prostitution issues, drug dealing, and we just talked about taking guns off the street. But we seem to be vexed on this criminal crew of the ATV riders and not able to put a true concrete plan on how to address it. I don't have the answer, but right now I'm looking for the answer. And I really need to know what that answer is. Because folks, if you want to know where the ATV riders are, come to my neck of the woods. Come to Nunaconic Park on any sunny day or Marino Park. I have 100 acres of woods. If you want to arrest those ATV riders, just put an officer on both corners and guess what? You'll arrest at least 50 of them. Because they're running rampant in my neck of the woods. And they sure don't care about my neighbors. And I bought a Cranston and Johnston in my neck of the woods. Marino Park, we've invested millions of dollars. Now I can tell you my rec centers, they're doing great. I've been investing in my rec centers. They're going at full speed. My parks are full speed. I don't need these ATV riders abusing the people that want to use these parks. So if you want to know where they all are, I'll give you all a ride. So I'm looking for a concrete action plan. What is it? We need to give people the assurance that we're really going to take this serious and then we're going to turn it around. Now, I am also concerned, Commissioner Perry. Commissioner Perry, you are the civilian authority of the paramilitary operations of the city. If your mayor is telling you he wants to legalize, this is what I think is interesting. We have criminal behavior that's been illegal, ATV riding, and yet the mayor of Providence wants to legalize criminal behavior. I'm kind of confused here. But meanwhile, it's not legal yet. So therefore, in case someday the mayor prevails upon the State House to legalize ATV riders up and down our streets and our sidewalks, we're not going to have a massive impact action plan on this. So I'm looking for you to commission immediately, not now. Excuse me, not yesterday, not now in 5 minutes, but by tomorrow. What is the action plan? I don't know what else you need to hear. So I'm looking to you to stand up and start doing this job. You have an obligation to do it. And if the mayor is wrong, you need to stand up to that policy. That alone has been detrimental to the city of Providence. And if you don't see it, by the fact that we're putting a foot patrol on a pedestrian bridge in downtown Providence to make sure ATV riders don't go on that bridge, clearly shows that the administration does take this issue serious, but just in certain neighborhoods. So folks, something's not right here. And those are the facts. Next, I would like to know about, are you going to take the governor's offer? And I know you mentioned on the neighborhood response program that they're offering, which is federally funded. It doesn't mean the state police are going to be walking our streets, but what it does, it can relieve certain aspects. Are we looking to, have we taken the governor up on his offer of having further complement our low ranks to help our Providence Police Department with this neighborhood response team? It's a yes or no question. Commissioner, you want to answer? Chief?
So I've met with Colonel Manny, and so yes, they have about $40,000 of federal money towards the neighborhood response team. It will not be the NRT in the form that we ran it years ago. It's under that federal grant. We've talked about using their assistance as it pertains to traffic enforcement in the ATVs. Yes. It's not a lot of money. That's $40,000. We'll run through that fairly quickly. But yes, we've accepted that resource and we can use it. This past Sunday, Colonel Manny and the Rhode Island State Police are dear friends of ours. We've had great relationships, and when we've asked for the assistance of the state police, whether it be public demonstrations, public assemblies. This past Sunday, we were very short in the workforce. We asked for 3 Rhode Island State Police, and he was very gracious and offered that, and we used them. So yes, we have in the past. We will continue in the future, not in the form of what Councilwoman Harris said to this point. That is not part of the conversations I've had with Colonel Manny. It will be in the form of addressing this very challenging ATV issue. And I can tell you, even though we've addressed organized crime and gang activity, and no one's done it better than us, including present gang activity, but ATVs is a challenge everywhere. It really is. In the bigger cities, DC, New York, Philly, and like cities of Providence, but I spoke at length with Colonel Manny the other day. We do have some initiatives and strategies I'd rather not share right here. But yes, and I think we can take a dive at it, and maybe we start in your park, New Connecticut.
By the way, it's not necessarily my park, it's the people's park. But if you want to find them, all you have to go there on any day. Marino Park, New Connecticut Park, Roger Williams Park, they're there. So just another note, I'm not looking to make those parks into ATV parks. We spend too much money making walking trails and making it a really wonderful place for people, families to go to and enjoy their time off. So we're not looking to make it that kind of place. So I do not agree with doing that. What I want to do is we need to take it back. As for the you said only 40,000 from the state police for the neighborhood response team. We have $110 million, I think, still pending in COVID relief money. And we can use that for anything. Can you suggest to the finance committee, to the council, ideas on how to utilize that to, as far as I'm concerned, to bring back community policing that creates empathy between our police officers and our constituents? And by the way, also, how can we beef up diversionary programs? So we need you, give us your suggestions.
My
So
suggestion.
we're looking for that. And by the way, if you're hampered, we'll figure out how to get you unrestricted, because my concern is, and I'm going to say this, Commissioner, my concern is I am concerned about bad policies that have created this situation in the city of Providence. So Chief, do you have any suggestions?
So my suggestions would be with that $110 million, let's start an academy right away. Let's maybe for the first time in many years, I've been open to the suggestion. I've spoken to the union president on lateral transfers. The quicker we can fill the ranks within the Providence Police Department so we can get back to what I feel is the best way to solve quality of life issues within our neighborhoods, let's do it. So I would suggest we use some of those monies for efforts like that, as well as the diversion programs that I spoke about. If we can take some of the burden off the police that not necessarily is our responsibility, but has been placed on us over the years. You know, at 2 o'clock in the morning on a Friday night or 10 p.m. on a Thursday night, who is it? When people have an issue, they call the police. They dial 911 and ask for the Providence Police. And that's probably our greatest endorsement, is 200,000 times a year, somebody picks up the phone and says, we need you. However, it's really not always our responsibility. So I think those monies should be directed at these diversion programs. And thirdly, these programs that we run. We can't run enough partnerships with the Institute and these other social service agencies, the YPI, the Youth Police Initiative. That's a fascinating program that we have data on that have yielded great success in youth in this community.
So, Chief, could we prevail upon you to put together a true action plan on how to create a more comprehensive program dealing with bringing back, when I mean community policing, I'm talking about foot patrols and bike patrols and officers getting to know the community, being part of the fabric of the community. We're not just talking about officers in a car, how we can get that piece, and then also how can we, expand our diversionary program so we can go on both cylinders, right? We can start deal even more impactful on the social issues facing the city. And then also on the other end, providing the quality of life protection people expect.
So the answer is yes, this is fixable. We have solutions. We can put together an immediate or a 3-year and a 5-year plan to address these issues and get back to the police department that we know through proven success. We have the playbook. We have the template. We've done it. But yes, we can put together a strategic plan addressing now, shortly out, once we graduate November 6th, a 3-year out plan and an extended plan.
Thank you. And then Commissioner, I'm looking upon you. We'd like to see an action plan on this ATV situation, working with Chief Clements, the state police. By the way, I bought a Cranston and Johnson, working with the Cranston police, the Johnston police, the North Providence police. Let's figure out how we can corral, and I call it this criminal behavior that's terrorizing our neighborhoods. We're looking for a real plan. I know the mayor wants to legalize it, but right now it's not legal. And you have an obligation on the charter, if I remind you, and I'll remind you, be charged with the responsible for the enforcement of all laws, ordinances, and promulgation and enforcement of rules and regulations of the police department. Right now, sir, before you on your desk is the rules and the ordinances that have been passed outlawing ATVs in the city of Providence. You have a charter obligation, legal obligation to put forward a plan and to address this. No woman, no person of any color, sex, sexuality, anything should be dragged out of any vehicle in the city of Providence by a gang of ATV riders. No council person, no chief of police should be surrounded by them. By the way, and they shouldn't be driving up and down like I see every day in front of City Hall with no one putting them in check. So we need something now. We need you to address it now. We need to give assurances now.
Understood. Let me be clear that not one time did I, on behalf of either the mayor or the administration, direct our police officers not to stop ATVs. It is illegal. It is frustrating that they do what they've done. And as I began, no one's more frustrated than everyone here because we hear the complaints and we see them as well. I hear you. I understand my authority, but I want to make sure that this council understands not one time were our police officers directed not to engage the ATVs or scooters, not to turn a blind eye, not to just let them go. It's complicated. One officer is not going to stop 10 ATVs, and they've attempted to, and they flee. And when they do it, it's at a high rate of speed and it becomes dangerous. So I hear you.
We recognize the challenges you have. We recognize the challenges you have, but the people of Providence deserve
Understood.
Results and expect results. So
Understood.
the people the most frustrated are the people who do live in the city on a daily basis. The business owners also, by the way, and
Understood.
the visitors. We need to make people feel comfortable in our city. And I appreciate the crime stats, I want to say that. But I've said it, and I've been, Councilman Harris and I know, been around a long time, Deputy Majority Leader. Statistics don't tell the true tale. If someone does not feel comfortable in their neighborhood, in their home, on their street, it doesn't matter how many times you toast, the crime statistics are down. I saw numerous commissioners and chiefs of police say the same thing over and over again, and the public demanded a response to what was going on because they didn't feel comfortable in their homes. So we need to make them more comfortable. Providence is a great city. There's a lot of great things here. We need to make the businesses feel comfortable. We need to make our visitors feel comfortable, right? We need to turn it around. So you folks have the position. You need to put together a true action plan, and we expect to hear from like soon, tomorrow. What's the plan? What are you going to do? How are we going to do it? Let's do it. You're a state police officer. You handled high-profile crimes in your job there. If you could get rid of those criminals there, you sure as hell can get rid of criminals in Providence, right? So let's get to work. That's what we need. Is there any more comments or questions by council members or committee members? With that said, I want to thank everybody. Councilman Castillo, my apologies. Councilman Castillo.
Thank you, Council President. We have City for Cranston and Johnston. They stop the interview before they come to the city. So why we don't working with the money we got to block these people to come inside to our neighborhood? Because I believe, so we block them and they can be available to go inside to our city, we can have it controlled. The police don't have to be enriched to stop them. We are tired for this. We are tired for we driving in the car and this guy coming to put the wheels up and we have to stop and waiting for everybody to go away. See, they can close the things that they can go inside to the city. Why we not? Why we can close the entrance? We know when they coming in. They make, they make when they have it, they make, in the social media, where are they going? So why we don't follow them and stop them before they come here? Thank you.
Do you want to answer that question before we convene, gentlemen?
No, I hear your frustration, and what I'll say is, it's easy for the other towns to say you're not coming here, but truth be told, the attraction isn't to Providence. It's into the major cities. They don't go to Johnston to ride around City Hall. The attraction is in the city of Providence. That's why they come here, not because we allow them to come here. I hear your frustration, and it's not as easy as you saw Cranston blocking Elmwood and they didn't go into Cranston. They don't want to go into Cranston. If they wanted to, Cranston police are not stopping them because they'll go right around them and use another access to the city of Cranston. So there's a feeling that we as a city or as a police department or me as a commissioner, come on in and ride recklessly here in the city of Providence. Nothing is further from the truth. It's not an easy solution that many cities are being faced with in how to resolve their coming and riding dangerously on the streets. So I'm not going to quarrel with you. I hear your frustration and you hear mine.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you for hearing us, but we want to see action now. You need to take the welcome act out of the front doorstep of City of Providence for the criminals and the ATV riders. You need to put forward a true action plan. Enough of the frustration, enough of the why you can't do it. You want to know why you can. So with that said, any further comments or questions? With that, we're going to make a motion to adjourn. I asked my council colleagues, we're going to do a 5-minute recess. Then we have the quick meeting upon the rise, and we'll go from there. Do I have a
Mr. President,
Majority Leader Taylor.
motion to adjourn in memory of retired fire dispatcher Fran Sweet, retired firefighter Michael Brown, and our beloved City Sergeant David Tassoni.
Second, Mr. President.
Motion by Majority Leader, second by Deputy Majority Leader Harris. We can all stand for a moment of silence, please. Thank you, gentlemen, for participating, council colleagues, and the public. This meeting is adjourned.